Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Wasn't Done Being a Villain? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Quirks are fickle things. By the age of 5 your fate is decided by your gift, quirk, power, mutation, whatever you want to call it. People say that those born with strong and amazing abilities should become heroes. That they have a duty to uphold justice and a responsibility to protect those around them. Similar to how your father became a hero. Your father was a hero's hero. Born into a bloodline of some of the most resilient warriors. He took his job and reputation seriously. When his quirk of invulnerability was activated, his skin would turn a dark crimson. 2 black streaks running down his eyes. You had oftentimes thought he looked like Darth Maul. He was revered as the top support hero, loved by all and looked up to by many. He was the poster boy for almost every support agency. Your mother was the healing saint, providing relief with a simple touch of her hand, healing an injury within the blink of an eye. She was held in high respect for her capabilities as a healer. They were the top-ranked heroes, 3rd and 7th place. Their offspring was bound to be the most powerful hero. That is, if they inherited both quirks. Which meant that legacy was passed on to you. The moment you were born your father decided, come what may, you would be a hero. You stared at your reflection in the water of your little inflatable pool. You couldn't believe it. You'd gotten your quirk. You made a serious face, mimicking the one your dad always had on TV. You almost looked like him. If only your quirk had been red too, that would have been even better. You had already tested it out by dropping one of the bricks your dad was using to pave the patio on your foot earlier. It hadn't even hurt. You had also tried to heal the marigolds your mom had planted, but you didn't have any luck. Maybe you'd get her quirk later. You had been at Richard's house when he got his quirk. He could camouflage with stuff. You'd lost him when you were playing hide and seek in the front room. His parents had been so proud of him. You'd been excited for weeks, waiting for your 4th birthday. Your dad had said everyone had gotten their quirks at 4 in his family and that you would too. But it had been 2 months since then. You thought you might not get one, but here it was. You tiptoed over to the back door, peeking inside to see if your mom was nearby. You wanted to surprise her. You had wanted your dad to be home too, but you couldn't wait any longer. You watched your mom pace back and forth in the kitchen. She was talking on the phone. Something about quirk suppressor? Suppress? Suppressors? You didn't know what that was, but it sounded boring. Not half as exciting as your new discovery. Mom, look it. You grinned, waving your arms as you jumped into the doorway. She nodded in your direction as she rummaged through the junk drawer, pulling out a pen. Very nice, dear, she murmured, writing something down on her notepad. You crossed your arms, making a face. She didn't even look. You jogged up behind her, tugging on the hem of her shirt. Mommy, Mommy, look it. You're not looking, you said, continuing to tug on her shirt. She gave a small sigh, covering the phone with her hand. Look at what hone dash, she choked on her words, eyes widening at what she found. Your skin had turned a dark metallic gray, 2 black V markings residing on your cheeks. You had inherited your quirk. Although instead of joy like Richard's parents, your mom looked worried. She crouched in front of you, doing her best to smile. You could tell it wasn't genuine. She did that a lot. Smiled when she didn't mean it. It made your chest hurt and your stomach tight. She cupped your face in her hands, running her thumbs over your cheeks. Almost like she was trying to rub the markings away somehow. Honey, let's not tell Daddy just yet. Okay? She said softly. You stomped your foot, giving an irritated huff. But I want Dad to see. See what? Your father called, coming in from the front room. Neither of you had heard him come in. Your mom stood up quickly, as if attempting to hide you from sight. She started to speak up, but you darted past her. Oh, it's no dash. I got my quirk. Look it, I'm like you. You beamed, crushing him in a hug. His face lit up immediately as he scooped you up in his arms. He activated his own quirk, his crimson skin a stark contrast to your own gray. But he was glad nonetheless. His heir had inherited his quirk. What do you know you did? You're going to be a hero like me or even greater. He grinned, spinning you in a circle. Your gleeful laughter filled the front room as you clung to his neck. At that moment you couldn't have been happier. You were going to be just like your dad. You never noticed your mother's pursed lips and misty eyes. You never saw the way her hands shook as she clasped them together, attempting to look happy for you. You didn't know the road that laid ahead of you. All you knew was that your dad was your hero, and you had the chance to be just like him. You thought that when you got your quirk, all your dreams would come true. You'd get to train with your dad and make both your parents proud. You would one day become just as powerful of a hero as your dad. Except things didn't go as planned. You were roughly 5 when you discovered your quirk had a 3-hour limit. At first your father was upset, but he quickly dismissed it. We can make those minutes stretch. I'm sure if we just exercise the time limit it'll get longer. I had to do that too, he had stated matter-of-factly. By the time you were 6 it was evident your time limit wasn't going to change. So instead of trying to get your time to stretch, he started working on your strength and agility. All 3 hours of your quirk were spent each day at your dad's hero agency. You had been excited to train, but you soon realized training wasn't that fun. He never held back when he sparred with you. You were so much smaller than him. This wasn't like the fun times when he would help you play hero with him. He knocked you across the mat with a single kick and would yell at you to get up. At first you'd cry and tell him it hurt and you didn't want to do it, which in turn made him yell louder. He'd tell you heroes don't cry. To get over it. That you were lying, that you couldn't feel pain with your quirk. And it was partially true. The blows never hurt when you had your quirk activated. But it terrified you the way he would punch you so hard it'd knock you down. From there it only got worse. At 8 years old he no longer cared about your time limit. You would train until bones were broken and your body was purple and blue. You remember coming home, hyperventilating as you tried to choke back sobs. Your dad stormed off to his office and slammed his door behind him. You stood in the doorway, shoulders heaving as you clutched your broken arm. Your dad had been pushing you past your limit as he always did now. You didn't recall how the injury had happened. Maybe you forgot to dodge. Or you didn't escape the pin right. All you knew was that if you didn't know what pain was, you certainly did now. Your mother had walked you to the bathroom and sat you down on the edge of the tub. She didn't say a word. She never did. She had pulled the tissue from your nose, gently wiping away the blood that covered your face. The familiar warm tingle spread over your skin as your broken nose healed back into place. That was one thing you were grateful for. Your mother's healing quirk. You wished you had inherited her power over your father's. Maybe he'd go easier on you if you had. You were vaguely aware of your mother whispering to you, followed by the crack of bone shifting. You didn't scream, you didn't even flinch. Instead, fresh tears welled to the surface of your eyes. They slowly dripped down your cheeks as the prospect of what tomorrow would bring flowed through your mind. You almost wished you had been born quirkless. Your life became a living nightmare the second you turned 12. You were placed into one of the most competitive middle schools in the US for hero training. You not only had to be the best in your normal classes, you now had to be the best in your fighting ones as well. The strain was starting to show not just in your home life but in your school life. You nearly leaped out of your sin when your teacher came up behind you in English. Your quirk activating in an instant to protect you from the non-existent attack. Your teacher had given you a look of concern but didn't say anything. You were constantly jumping, keeping high on alert, and took criticism harshly. You suppose it wasn't normal for someone your age to be so well trained and paranoid. Your math teacher was the one to pull you aside and ask if everything was okay. You supposed she noticed because you had a mental breakdown when she told you you had failed 2 tests. She asked if everything at home was all right. You didn't know what to tell her. That you were being beaten every night until 11:30? That your father would literally break your bones because you didn't try hard enough? That he'd force you to try and bench press insane amounts of weight because you were too weak? That he berated you and degraded you every chance you got? What proof did you have? Your mother healed all of the injuries people could see. So you did the only thing you could think of. You lied and said everything was fine. Around the time you were 14 you found something that you could control. It never required a quirk or even anything to do with your dad. It was thrilling, a rush of adrenaline that didn't come from fighting. It was based on skill and deceit. Two things you had to learn to survive with your father. You discovered the thrill of pickpocketing. You started small, snagging earrings at Target or a chocolate bar here or there. Then you met others like you, looking for a thrill that didn't come at the risk of harm. That's when your little habit got worse. You now had people to teach you the ropes. How to bump into someone and make it seem like an accident. How to conceal items in your sweatshirt so no one could tell you had stolen the headphones you really wanted. You no longer wanted the small, frivolous things. You wanted the harder items. Necklaces, watches, decadent items. And what better places to find them than at hero galas? The large parties were crowded with plenty of bustle. You took up the art of pickpocketing. You always returned what you took, but the thrill of snagging a watch from Subnautica or a necklace right off of Slither's neck was intoxicating. It was a challenge, and of course you got caught. At first. Though since you were still fairly young, you could persuade them it was an accident. A slip of your hand, just bumping into them, loose latches on their accessories. They believed you until you were about 16. That's when your father caught on. You had always used your invincibility to protect yourself from him before, so it was nothing new when he tore into you when you got home from a gala one evening after Subnautica told him about his missing watch. He thought he had somehow nipped your little problem in the bud that night. He had never been more wrong. You had a black eye for a week after he found Gargantium's wrist communicator in your room. He constantly degraded you for your new hobby. He had ordered your mother not to heal it. Maybe you'll get it through your thick skull this time, he had hissed at your. You could hardly hear him over the thundering pulse in your ears. He started calling you out at every turn. He thought he was helping to stem the problem. That by punishing you he was discouraging you from your thieving. Instead it made you smarter, better, more skilled at hiding everything. The harder he lashed out, the farther away you became. You had hoped your mother would step in, but she never did. She would turn a blind eye or tell you it was technically your fault. They would both gang up on you, telling you you would never amount to anything if you continued down the path you were on. It did little to sway your mind. If you weren't going to amount to anything, then why stop? Your friends from middle school started to find bigger and bigger heists when you arrived in high school. Ones far more experienced in the field of breaking and entering, along with burglary. You had never personally stolen anything while on heists with them. If you could even call them heists. If anything, you were a mere lookout. Hardly involved. You were sure you were doing this partially to spite your parents. But a small part of you genuinely liked it. The excitement of hiding your activities from everyone. The rush of the escape whenever the police arrive. The trust that you and your friends had with one another. You couldn't lie to yourself, it was fun. However, the older you got, the more your friends started to push you. Trying to make you prove you were worth keeping around. That you were really willing to go all the way as a thief. That you had the guts to do what they did, and you'd never known when to back down from a challenge. That's when your life started to turn from bad to worse. You had just barely graduated high school. You had just barely turned 18 and ready to face the world. Your friends had planned out a simple heist for you to pull. One that would be a piece of care. Barely any danger at all. Little did you know you were about to pull off the stupidest stunt you had ever pulled in your entire life. Your friends had picked out a small run-down pawn shop. Like one of the ones they had stolen from when you were sophomores. It was in one of the worst places downtown. Tucked in the back street behind a couple of greasy restaurants. It was closed down due to water damage. The repairman had to tear part of the ceiling out due to black mold or something. Nobody was going to be there this late in the afternoon, they told you. It was supposed to have been easy, right? Except it hadn't. You tripped a silent alarm on your way in. Your friends bolted the second the police siren sounded. But you weren't so lucky. The hot California air made it hard to stay awake as you sat with your back pressed to a jewelry case. The wool ski mask you wore was starting to itch as sweat seeped into the fabric. You wanted to take it off. Even if just for a second, to wipe your face off. Which was a really bad idea considering the situation you were currently in. Glass littered the floor around you. Your heart pounded against your chest as you peeked around the display case you were currently hiding behind. Outside were not one, not two, but 5 cop cars. The officers were waiting behind the safety of their cars. Now, you weren't violent whenever the authorities showed up. You never harmed an officer or civilian. If anything, you tried to avoid them altogether. It was a rule amongst your group. You were cat burglars. It was in your job description to get in and out without anyone ever knowing. The one time they had actually arrived on time and they had to choose today. You should have known better than to trip a silent alarm. You had gotten sloppy in the last month, starting to get confident in your endeavors. You glanced down at the watch you had. The background was a light green. It was the watch your father had specially made for your quirk. The one he gave you for your 10th birthday. He'd be furious if he found out you were using it for something other than heroics. The flashing bold numbers brought you back to reality. 2 hours and 3 minutes. Well, at least you still had time left. Let's see that you could easily make a run for the back door. They probably didn't have any officers out back yet. All you had to do was kick down the door and sprint to freedom. Easy peasy. Nothing to it. You'd get away and you wouldn't have to fight anyone. Truly a win-win situation. Swallowing the lump in your throat, you got into a crouch. Eyes fixed on your target, the hallway leading into the back of the store. Down the hallway was a fire exit leading to a back alley. The only barrier between you and freedom. You were surprised the cops hadn't tried to talk you out yet. Surely they should have announced for you to come out with your hands up. Then again, what did you know? You'd never been caught so far. And the only experience with cops you had was the ones on the TV show NCIS. Hardly a realistic portrayal. That's when your wish came true. Come outside with your hands above your head. We've contacted hero support, and they've sent a hero to assist us. If you come out now, you will not be harmed. A voice crackled over a bullhorn. You felt your blood run to ice. A hero? They'd called a hero? But you hadn't done anything. Okay, you'd broken into a pawn shop, but seriously? Why call a hero for this? You were a petty thief. Liking your dry lips, you attempted to calm your thundering heart. You'd be gone by the time the hero showed up. You were going to be fine. Stop panicking and just run already. Taking a deep breath, you activated your quirk. Your skin turned to a dark gray as your body turned invincible. You leaped forward as someone shouted behind you. There was a deafening pop as you slid into the hallway leading to the emergency exit. Smoke filled the store where you had just been. Probably tear gas. It was a good thing you decided to use your quirk. With a swift kick, you sent the door toppling down. Yet another thing you were grateful for with your quirk. You literally became an immovable object and could break through things pretty easy. The fire alarm started blaring, making you duck in surprise. Oh, you'd forgotten about that. Sirbi. Now you'd have even more authorities on the way. You bolted down the alleyway, turning the corner to see the street empty. For they hadn't placed any officers in the back. Your luck seemed to be running high today. You took off at a full-on sprint, hoping against hope the hero was slower than you were. You knew they'd be onto you quick. You had a head start and weren't about to waste it. The only sound in the entire street was your sneakers slapping against the pavement. It was unnerving to say the least. You had expected them to give chase, or for cars to pull up or something. Perhaps they'd given up? Maybe they realized you hadn't taken anything with you. Not your smartest move, Grant. But you were more concerned with staying out of jail rather than making off with a bag of loot. You glanced over your shoulder to make certain you weren't being followed. That was your first mistake. You ran into what felt like a brick wall, bouncing off with a muffled oof. You landed flat on your back. Eyes wide in surprise as you stared up at the evening sky. What just happened? You didn't think there had been a wall there. Groaning, you sat upright, rubbing your head as you looked up at what had stopped you. You almost peed yourself at the sight. A hulking giant towered over you. At least 7 feet of raw muscle, clad in costume and gleaming smile. It was a hero. They had really called a hero on you. He had 2 odd blonde bangs that stuck up in a V shape. A dark blue cape with metal boots and cuffs. You had seen him on TV once or twice. You'd never paid attention enough to catch his name. He was still a small-time pro, but a pro nonetheless. Stand down, villain. You're coming with me, he stated, his smile seeming somewhat sinister from where you sat. While you had made a vow to never attack a hero or authority figure. But the second he reached for your arm, your flight or fight instincts kicked in. And after the beatings you had taken from your father, fight was the instinct that took over. He grabbed your wrist, and that's when you made your second mistake. You swung at him. You knew it wouldn't do much damage. While your body was impervious to any and all attacks, it was still as weak as you were. Your fist punch knocked his hand away before he could touch your shoulder. You scrambled to your feet, dodging past him. How do you escape a hero? How do you get away from someone with super speed and strength? You barely made it 10 feet before you were swept up off the ground, your feet dangling in open air. He was holding you by the back of your jacket, a blessing in disguise. You were grateful you had worn it to help hide your figure. You unzipped it, falling the 2 feet to the ground. He was already reaching for you again. You had to think fast. Come on. Think. You were invincible. You could probably fight him. You had enough time left with your quirk. If you battled him, you could probably tire him out, force him to let you go. But if you did that, the cops would have you surrounded. What were you going to do? You swatted his hand away, ducking under his arm. Bringing your fist forward, you socked him as hard as you could in the gut. To your surprise, he actually stumbled backwards. Hey, maybe you did have some strength after all. He glared at you, planting one foot behind him. But raising his fist, he glared you down. Not good. Texas smash. He shouted. You didn't even see his hand move, you just saw the tunnel of air heading straight for you. The blast almost toppled you over completely. What the heck? How strong was this guy? You lowered your arms to peer fearfully at the blonde giant. He seemed just as shocked as you were, but for different reasons. Nobody had ever managed to keep standing after a Texas smash. How were you still upright? You leaped to the side as he attempted another punch, yelling a state name and slapping a smash on the end. Some power move that was. You were kind of proud of yourself for keeping toe-to-toe with the man. He spun about, catching you off guard. You didn't have time to sidestep his attack. You prayed to the stars above this was going to work. You reached forward, managing to snag his fist in your hand, ultimately stopping his punch in its track. A gust of wind tore past you, whipping at our clothes. The wind blinded you for a brief second as your eyes watered. Blinking away the bleariness, you saw the hero gazing at you in total shock. Time to make your move. Do or die. You smashed your fist into his face, keeping your hold on his hand so he wouldn't fall back. You hoped he'd forgive you. That or forget this completely. You kicked his knee, forcing him to the ground while he was still stunned. This move had worked on your bully in 5th grade. Your dad didn't exactly teach you to handle your problems correctly. Hopefully it'd work now. You got him into a headlock and he finally came back to life. He lurched to his feet, and that's when you started fearing for your life. No, not when the cops had cornered you, or when they shot tear gas to stop you. Nor was it when the hero could have killed you with a single punch. It was right here, right now, as you clung to this heathen's neck, trying to choke him unconscious. His fingers dug into your skin as he shook you, similar to how a dog might shake itself to get rid of water from its fur. He was gagging, gasping for air, and you felt like a total monster. He collapsed to his knees, one hand pressed to the pavement while the other still tried to pry you off. You knew from experience his efforts were in vain. An immovable object can't be forced, no matter how strong you were. He fell forward onto the road and you finally released him. Standing over the fallen hero, you wondered how long you could be imprisoned for this. Then a second thought struck you. Had you just killed him? Sure, when you did it to Chad he just passed out. But you were so full of adrenaline you didn't know if you'd crushed his windpipe. No. What if you had? What if you had killed him? You couldn't get any more panic than you already were. You dropped to one knee to get a better look at him. Please, don't be dead, you whispered fearfully. Gently pressing your fingers to his neck, you waited. After a few seconds you found a pulse. Steady and strong. Thank goodness. At least you won't be charged with murder. Glancing up and down the street, you made sure you were still alone before you broke into a run once again. Although this time you wouldn't be looking back. You rubbed at the bruise forming on your shoulder from where heavy hitter had grabbed you. You'd have thought you'd learned from your first attempt at robbing someplace. Yet here you sat, in the back of a cop car with cork restrainer cuffs, canceling out any chance of escape. Granted, it wasn't as big a crime as last time. At least you didn't consider it that big a crime. There wasn't really any breaking and entering. You hadn't even attacked anyone this time. You'd stolen one of the snobby kids' cars. A sleek black Chevy Impala. You weren't caught when you stole it. You weren't even caught while doing 100 down the freeway during your joyride. No, you had been caught when you returned the car. You and your friends weren't complete idiots. You knew to return the car before anyone noticed. Except the cops had been waiting, along with Timothy Grace. To be honest, you didn't feel sorry. Timothy was a complete jerkwad and had done plenty worse to kids during your high school life. Though the second you and your friends saw the flashing lights, you bolted, scrambling out of the car as you darted in opposite directions. This time you hadn't been so lucky. One of the heroes had managed to pin you to the ground. You had already wasted half your invincibility for the day. So you couldn't fight back and you couldn't pry the cop car door off to escape. Thankfully, they didn't know about your previous scuffle at the jewelry shop, or the fight with the hero. However, you had gotten caught. It wasn't even your fault this time, at least. You'd probably get let off the hook. The car slowed to a stop in front of your house and you felt your gut drop. No. You'd all but forgotten about this part. Here you were, 18, and being dragged to your front door by a policewoman. All at 3 in the morning when you were supposed to be sleeping. Your parents were going to kill you and bury you in the backyard. Swallowing the lump in your throat, you pursed your lips. The officer knocked on the door and rung the bell. When no one responded, she tried once more. You hoped that maybe they wouldn't answer, that you'd have to go to the station instead. At least then you wouldn't have to face the full wrath of your father. The porch light flicked on, crushing those hopes, however. Your face paled as the door opened. Your father stood before you in pajama bottoms and a white shirt, eyes squinting in the light of the porch before his eyes landed on you. There was a brief second of recognition before anger. Oh, you were dead. You were so dead. If it was possible, you'd have shrunk to the size of an ant so you could scamper away like the coward you were. You could barely hear anything the police officer was saying as your pulse roared in your ears. Your skin was slick from sweat and not from the California heat. It was from the dread of how your father would react. At some point your mother had arrived to listen in on the conversation. You were uncuffed, given a warning, and that was that. The cop was gone, taking her car and what safety you had with her. You were left standing on the front porch, heart pounding as you kept your gaze at your father's chest level. You stole a car? He growled, voice already an octave louder than it normally was. He wasn't even going to ask if you were okay. He was just going to go straight for angry. All right, time to play meek and vulnerable. You had to get him calm. Yes, sir, you mumbled. It was better to just admit you had instead of denying it was you. Sure, you were in the car, but it wasn't you who hot-wired it. That had to count for something, right? You've been pushing your luck, Y/N. I've turned a blind eye to your little antics. Picking fights with the other kids. Sneaking out at night. But stealing a car? He snapped. His temper was quickly rising. This was going to get ugly if you didn't think of a lie to get out of it. But I didn't know, Dash. You didn't know? Too late, you'd blown any chance of getting away with this. He slammed his fist against the door frame, making you jump. You stole a car, with those low-life thugs you call friends, and you're standing here, telling me you had no idea? He roared. Your gaze shifted to your shoes. Your hands shaking as you stuffed them in your jacket pockets. Relax, it's going to be okay. He's just blowing off steam. It'll be okay. Get out of my sight. Your head snapped to attention at his words. Get out. Wait, no. But Dash, you were cut off by his steely glare. His face contorted with unchecked fury. You shrunk back, hoping your mother might speak up. Talk him out of what he was about to do. But the look on her face told you you wouldn't be receiving any help. She cast you a disappointed look before turning her back, disappearing back into the dark house. Don't you ever show your face here again. Your father hissed, slamming the door shut in your face. The porch light flicked off, leaving you alone in the cold night. You stood stock still, hoping beyond hope that he might come back. That'd he say he was sorry and to just go to your room and stay there. But it didn't happen. Hot tears burned at your eyes as you floundered with what to do. You didn't have your phone. You had left it in the house. You didn't have any money on you. No. What did you do? You were an idiot. You gripped your hands behind your neck, turning to face the street. Where were you going to go? California might be for the rich and famous, but at night it was almost as dangerous as New York. A homeless shelter? But you had no idea where one was. Besides, you weren't homeless. You'd come back when your dad calmed down. Maybe a friend would let you stay over. You rubbed at your eyes as you tried to bite back the sobs. Okay, this was fine. You'd be fine. It was fine. You'd just head over to Samantha's house or Peter's. They'd let you stay over. Yeah, you'd stay with them until this all blew over. It'd be fine in a day or two. Wiping your cheeks with the back of your sleeve, you started down the steps. The shadows around you seeming to shift and take on the form of villainous shapes. You'd never realize just how scary the night could be until that moment. Especially when you were all alone. You strapped and unstrapped the Velcro of your gloves, adjusting the tightness until you were practically cutting off the circulation in your hands. You were sporting a new look. You no longer wore baggy briefs and a sweater. There was no ski mask to irritate your skin. No, you had actually gone out and commissioned someone to make you a super sweet. It took you about 3 months of looting and robbing pawn shops to save up for it. It was simple in design. A black long-sleeve turtleneck, a dark blue vest and matching climbing halter around your waist. Black cargo briefs and combat boots. Dark blue gloves and a cowl mask that hid your face. 2 blue rings surrounding your eyes. You looked like a knockoff brand Deadpool. You weren't really going for originality. You were going for durability. And hey, if you looked like your favorite Marvel character, why complain? Taking a deep breath, you glanced up at the large building in front of you. It wasn't a pawn shop, but a mall. In your opinion, it was a step up. More security guards, more alarms, more thrill. You liked your lips unholstering the grappling hook from your belt. Clipping the wire to your holster, you raised the gun. Taking careful aim of one of the edge of the roof. How crazy were you? Were you really doing this? You didn't want to be a burglar forever. Then again, that was what the mask was for. No one would know it was you. Besides, go big or go home, right? Ironic considering you no longer had a home to go to. Were you being smart in continuing your line of work? No, but it was fun and thrilling. That's all you wanted right now. The adrenaline rush. The chase. You didn't want to think about your father's words. Or the look of disappointment on your mother's face. Tonight you weren't Y/N Wilson. You were Invincible, the thief of Los Angeles. An unstoppable villain. Working your way up in the criminal underworld. Clenching your jaw, you aimed towards the roof. Firing off the grapple hook. Much to your joy, it latched onto the edge of the roof. Metal barbs digging into the concrete. And on your first try. Thank you, Shady Gear Lady. You gripped the wire, planting your feet on the cement. Okay, it was just like rock climbing on your 10th birthday. If you fell, no big deal. You'd turn invincible. Granted, you'd make a human-sized crater on the ground below. But that wasn't about to stop you. You made the slow and agonizing climb up the wall. Gritting your teeth, you awkwardly scrambled over the edge of the roof. Falling 3 feet and landing with a soft clunk. Note to self, get spiked boots next time. You lay still for a few moments. Trying to catch your breath. Who knew being a thief would be so hard? You'd have to work out more too. Taking a deep breath, you pushed yourself up onto your knees. Okay, where was the roof entrance? Your eyes scanned the barely visible rooftop. At least you were smart enough to come on a new moon when there wasn't any light out. No one would spot you. The only problem was you couldn't see anything either. You finally spotted the maintenance door off to the side of the roof. Scuffling across the roof like a crab, you tried to keep low. Just in case a hero was in the area. The last thing you wanted was to get caught. You pulled the key from your pocket, having nicked it from one of the janitor's carts a few days ago. You had to admit you were getting good at this. You were pretty proud of yourself too. Who said a hero's daughter couldn't become a great thief? You pulled the door open enough for you to slip inside. Careful not to trip any security alarms on your way down to the 2nd-story level. You knew the cash registers were locked up. There wasn't any money to be stolen. But there was jewelry and smaller items like toys. You could pawn those off. It was petty and a low-life way to go about it. But it was a way to get money nonetheless. Sure, you could get a low-paying job. But where was the fun in that? You slunk over to the jeweler's booth. removing a small pen from one of your pockets. Okay, let's see if your tech agent was as good as she talked. You pressed the small clicker on the end, watching the tip of the pen glow a hot yellow. Alright, let's see what this thing can do. You pressed the tip to the metal gate, slowly and painstakingly melting a hole the size of you. You knew once the gate was broken you had about 2 minutes to get in and out. You made a decent-sized circle in the gate, about the size of you while crouched. Turning the pen off, you stuck it back in your hip pocket. Big mistake. That thing was hot. You mouthed a silent curse as you yanked it back out, dropping it on the ground as you shook your hand. Ow. Ow, ow, ow. Note to self. Wait for pen to cool down next time. Yeesh, with all the notes you were taking you should have brought a memo book. You sat down on your butt, bringing your legs close to your chest. With a swift kick the circle you had made broke away. Hey, what do you know? It really worked. You crawled in on your stomach, the pen now safely back in your pocket now that it had cooled. Surprisingly, you didn't hear any alarms. Nor did the small device on your watch alert you to any silent ones. The lady you went to had upgraded your watch. Not only did it tell you how much invincibility you had left, but it let you eavesdrop on police scanners, alert you to alarms, and tell you what heroes were in what areas. You opened the bag that had been attached to your belt, shifting to your invincible form. Raising your fist, you brought it down with a deafening smash, the glass case shattering on impact. It might be bulletproof, but it wasn't you-proof. Wow, that sounded lame now that you thought about it. The alarm finally went off as you scooped diamonds and rubies into your small sack. Once it was decently full, you wiggled back out through the hole you had made, tucking your bag safely back on your belt. You sprinted towards the stairs when your watch began beeping. What the heck? It wasn't supposed to make noise. You scrambled to open the door as you raced up the stairs. Glancing down at the glowing blue screen of your watch, you were hit with a wave of confusion. What did V mean? Wait, no, that wasn't a V. It was a weird squiggle meant to look like eyes. What the heck was this? The eyes seemed to be moving. A red blip moving closer and closer to the little green dot. You could only assume you were the green dot. Then the red dot must be that you slowed to a stop at the top of the stairs. The red blip landing just outside. The red dot was a hero. Well, you were screwed. You turned tail heading back down the stairs. Okay, choices. Plan A, hide and hope they leave. Plan B, fight them not knowing who it was. Plan C, turn yourself. Yeah, Plan C wasn't really an option at this point. You passed the second floor heading for the first floor. They'd probably assume you were still at the jewelry store. Who would think you'd hide on the ground level? You leaped over the counter of American cookies, hiding beneath the counter as you hugged your knees to your chest. Quieting your breathing, you listened for movement. Heavy clicking met your ears as you sat still. It sounded like boots almost. They stopped walking and you tensed. From what you could tell, they were on the second-story floor, probably looking down below to try and spot you. David, no one's here, a deep voice stated. It sounded semi-familiar. Then again, you'd seen plenty of heroes with a similar voice. It could be Oceanic, Heavy Hitter, that one Japanese guy, Hades, or Titan, all of whom would be incredibly difficult to beat in a one-on-one battle. You could hear the faint jabbering of a phone. No, an earpiece. Heroes used those to communicate with a home base. This was obviously a pro if he had help. No, they must have escaped as soon as I left, the hero explained. You went rigid at his words. He might be playing you. You'd seen it in comics and movies alike. It was always comic relief, a GG type of scene. The villain thought they were getting away scot-free before they turned the corner and thwem. Hero was still there. It looks like they melted their way through the grate. Maybe a heat quirk. The man hummed. You felt your heart lurch into your throat. He was moving again, walking towards the jewelry booth. It was right across from your hiding spot. If he turned around, he would spot you for sure. Thankfully, he still had his back to you. His finger pressed to his ear as he kept talking. You couldn't see his costume yet, but you could tell he was large. It was probably Oceanic. In which case you were going to be slaughtered if you didn't run. No problem. You could handle this. Hop the counter, walk under where he stood, keep out of sight and break out the front door. You were quietly sliding across the countertop when the jewelry in your bag tinkled. It was barely soft enough for you to hear. Yet he turned around like he'd just heard a gunshot. You bolted before he could react, your boots absorbing the friction of its soles against the floor. You were glad you had paid the extra money for silent boots. If you tried to hide, he couldn't track you. He obviously had heightened hearing. A heavy thump sounded from behind you. He had no doubt jumped down to the first floor. You'd gotten a head start. There was no catching you now. A blur of bright blue and white, and you had struck a wall. You bounced off, but this time you didn't fall. This felt a little too familiar. Stumbling backwards, you looked up to see that, oh, come on. This guy again. Why was it always him? Did he have sort of petty thief radar? As soon as you entered his radius, it'd ding, and he'd leap like Superman to stop you. Wait, did this make you his arch nemesis? You shook your head, scowling to yourself. No, you were hardly a villain right now. Besides, arch nemesis held your love interest hostage and threatened to destroy the earth like those old black and white movies. You're coming with me, he snapped, attempting to grab your shoulder. No, he wouldn't get lucky enough to grab you this time. You'd been practicing. You'd been training on how to fight back better. This time, you wouldn't win by luck. You'd win by skills. You ducked into a crouch before launching yourself full force upwards. Your head struck his chin full force with a resounding crack. It was his turn to stumble backwards. You raised your fists knowing you'd have to fight him. There was no chance of getting around him. He'd just outrun you. You had to wound him. That or knock him out like last time. Though you doubted he'd let you get that close. He rubbed his chin, almost looking as if he were impressed. That was a dirty move, he huffed, matching your defensive stance. You couldn't believe your ears. He called you out for fighting dirty? He didn't know you were a thief, right? I'm a villain. What did you expect? You quipped back. A little more class, he retorted. You were still learning. He wound his fist back, and you knew instantly you needed to move. You dodged to the left into the corridor leading outside. You glanced back at him when you didn't hear any state smash. He was standing there grinning at you. The JRK had faked you out. Wait, why wasn't he moving? You did a quick double take of your surroundings to find out. You hated this guy's guts. The top of a metal cage slammed shut on the plaque you stood on. It was a trap. He'd known full well you were here all along. You were absolutely fuming as he strode over to you. You've been a menace to the police department of Los Angeles. None of the other heroes would help since you were a small-time villain. So I stepped in. Your reign of terror stops here, he smiled cheerfully. You blinked, wondering if the man had seriously stepped out of a Superman comic book. Who the heck even said that anymore? Your reign of terror stops here? Really? He turned his back to you, pressing his earpiece as his gaze wandered over the shops near you. It's safe. The trap worked, he called. One of the doors opened as yet another man strode out. He looked slightly younger, with long brown hair and a white lab coat. A sidekick, maybe? That was a weird-looking costume for a sidekick, though. I told you it would. Even if she does have a heat quirk, the bars are made to withstand supernova's heat. She even tested them for me. The man declared triumphantly. You stared at the two of them. They really didn't know your quirk? You thought it was obvious. They continued talking without so much as glancing back at you. Guess not. Looking at the bars, they seemed to be about as thick as your arm. But that was no matter. You could still easily bend them. Sure, you didn't have super strength. But you were an immovable force. You could bend metal and crush diamond. Your grip was practically a vice. You took hold of the bars, gritting your teeth. Invincibility, don't fail me now. You tugged with all your might. The bars gave a squeak as they trembled under your force. That caught their attention. The sidekick broke into a wide grin as he shook his head. I wouldn't do that. The bars are made of titanium, not to mention reinforced with dash. He was cut off when the bars gave way. The screeching of metal filling the air as both bars bent out of shape. The sidekick's eyes widened in disbelief. You tore one of the bars off on accident, tripping out of the cage with a startled yelp. All three of you froze in uncertainty. You were free, now you had to do something. Well, you had a makeshift weapon. Might as well use it. Taking a breath, you gathered your courage. Gripping the bar harder, you swung with every ounce of strength in your body. You had one shot to knock him out, you better not waste it. You caught the hero upside the head, launching him clear across the mall through of the metal grates of a store. Home run. As for the sidekick, he wasn't a problem. He ducked back into the room he had been in before. It was better to leave the guy alone. You kept the bar with you in case the hero got up as you sprinted out the door. You were making up a plan as you went. You were in a parking lot. There had to be a car you could hot wire and escape in. And lo and behold, what did you find around the next corner? A big shiny red car. Not just any car, it was obviously the hero's. With boosters and everything. I mean, you knew it had a tracking device. But seriously, who cared? You'd ditch it somewhere once you got far enough out. You hopped into the driver's seat, tossing the bar out into the parking lot. A wicked smile forming as you spotted the keys in one of the cup holders. Oh, this was going to be fun. Dave stared at the empty parking lot, jaw slack as he realized his top invention had been stolen. Toshinori stood beside him, his hand pressed to the side of his head as he tried to stem the bleeding from where you had nicked him. It wasn't a deep cut, but he no doubt had a concussion, which was a fate in and of itself, considering how durable One for All made him. We have to go get it back. If she takes that to a villain, we're done for. Go, I'll catch up. Dave shouted, shoving against the hero's waist. Toshinori shook his head, trying to clear the haze that was clouding his mind. Alright, I'm on it, he stated, crouching. With a single leap he was halfway across town. Though he didn't make the landing. His foot twisted under him and he was sent tumbling head over heels. He came to a stop at the edge of the sidewalk, grumbling to himself as he blew the end of his cape out of his face. Damn it, why'd I leave the keys in the cup holder? He growled, stumbling to his feet. Next time he was definitely taking the keys with him. The hustle and bustle of the city had died down for the night. A clock tower chimed 1 in the morning. All was still, until the roar of an engine brought the night back to life. A sleek red car shot over a hill, tires coming off of the ground before slamming back onto the pavement with a clash. Your head jolted from the impact, but you didn't mind. Who would? You were going over 120 miles an hour, and the pedal wasn't even halfway down. You hadn't been this excited since the night you stole that Impala. You jerked the steering wheel, almost capsizing as the car whipped around a corner. This was the best car ever. Not only was it fast, it could actually handle curves and corners despite its size. Out of the corner of your eye you caught a glimpse of blue. Wait, had the hero already gotten back up? You hit him upside the head about 15 minutes ago. He'd probably woken up a few minutes after you left. You turned into a roundabout, drifting to the best of your abilities, performing donuts around the fountain in the center of the square. That's when you got a good look at who it was. Oh, CRP. That wasn't Wonder Boy, that was Oceanic. The towering giant of metal lumbered onto the sidewalk, scuba helmet swiveling to stare you down. You slammed your foot on the brake as his drill came down hard in front of the hood of the car, barely missing the shiny bumper as it cracked the pavement. You moved the clutch, shifting into reverse as you floored it. The tires skidded, unable to gain traction on the smooth road. Your stomach lurched into your throat as Oceanic raised his drill. The tires spun out before finally gaining friction. The car skittered backwards like a startled mouse. You spun the wheel, bringing the car about, barely managing to shift into drive as you did so. A thundering crack sounded as Oceanic's drill hit the ground again, skimming the back of the car. He watched as you escaped down the road, not showing any signs that he'd give chase. It was unnerving. You kept glancing over your shoulder while you drove, wondering how fast Oceanic could move in the clunky armor he used. He seemed to be pretty quick on TV. Maybe you should increase your speed. You were glancing over your shoulder when someone stepped out into the road, neither of you aware of the other's presence nor paying attention. Not until you hit the person head-on. They bounced off the front of the car, scaring you witless. A scream escaped you as you realized you'd hit a person. You slammed on the brakes, the car rocking at the sudden halt. You turned around in your seat, eyes wide with terror. There, lying in the middle of the road, was the hero from the mall. No. You'd killed him. You felt a wave of nausea sweeping through you as you started to dry heave. Oh my gosh. You were going to jail. Could you suffer the death penalty for this? What was the punishment for killing a hero? A groan caught your attention as you tried to fight back the urge to vomit. The hero was climbing to his feet, looking a little loopy but otherwise okay. You're alive. You shrieked, relief flooding you almost instantly. At least you wouldn't be put in the electric chair or whatever they used nowadays. He squinted at you before breaking into a scowl. Give back the car now. He snapped, taking a wobbly step forward. You glanced behind him to see Oceanic sprinting down the street towards you. No thank you? You replied, feeling slightly bad for how much brain damage you were probably causing this guy. But you kinda needed to get away. He lunged just as you revved the engine. Tires squealing, you tore down the road, leaving both heroes in the dust. Alright, time to head back to your base. It wasn't even a base. It was an abandoned apartment complex. Not the best place to live, but it was actually cleaner than you expected. But first you had to ditch the car. The car jolted, sending your head colliding with the steering wheel. You blinked away the spots from your vision. What had just happened? Peering behind you, you found two water tendrils holding the bumper of the car off the ground. Oceanic stood a few feet behind you, the two port in his gloves open. He had activated his quirk. He was growing closer and closer with each clanking step he took. How had he caught up to you? You were literally 100 feet away from him when you started driving. His drill scraped against the ground, sending small sparks flying. That got your brain functioning again. All right, you couldn't go forward. What about backward? You pressed your foot to the brake, changing gears. You weren't even taking chances. He had thick metal armor. He'd be fine. You pressed your foot all the way to the floor as the car shot backwards at lightning speed. You flipped over the dashboard onto the front of the car from the force. A thundering crash met your ears as the back of the car literally drove over Oceanic. Your jaw dropped at the sight. The most feared water-bending hero, stuck like a turtle on its back with a car on top of him. If you weren't scared for your life, you might have honestly laughed. A breathy giggle escaped your lips as you slid off the hood of the car. Might as well just leave it here and try and ditch your costume. That always worked for Spider-Man. Why wouldn't it work for you? You jogged towards the nearest shop, darting into the back alley as you started to strip down. It was then that you realized this was a very poor decision. Not only was it hard to get your climbing gear off, it was even more difficult to pry your turtleneck off. Not to mention your mask. You felt your heart thundering against your ribs, hyper-aware of every passing second that would lead to your inevitable capture. Bundling your costume up, you stuffed it behind the dumpster. You were now left in your sweaty tank top and workout shorts. The combat boots might give you away, but running barefoot would be even more suspicious. You emerged on the other side of the alley, breaking into a jog as you scanned the mostly empty street. There were people near these shops, unlike the other streets you had cruised down. You looked like an ordinary civilian, out for a nightly jog at 1 in the morning. Nothing weird about that at all. The people around you didn't even give you a second glance as you passed them by, eagerly chatting away about their lives. You feared either hero might appear at any second, calling you out and dragging you off to jail. But surprisingly, nothing happened. Your breathing was jagged as you continued your jog. You'd go to your hideout first. Your loot and costume could wait till morning. It was far too risky to return tonight. You paused at a crosswalk, sandwiched between a group of incredibly drunk girls, all in matching pink and black tiger-striped dresses. One of the taller women was wearing a crown, reading Bachelorette. And then I said, "But I like this lipstick." Nad, you know what she told me? "It's too red for my complexion. I mean, I should know what looks good on me." The Bachelorette huffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "I know. Those makeup people were so pushy," a cat-eared girl nodded, her tail whipping about haphazardly. The light turned green for you to walk, and you used the group as a type of shield, all the while having to listen to the gossip and hissy fits. Well, at least this was better than being chased by heroes. Police lights glinted off the shop windows where the car chase had gone down. Heavy Hitter lifted the back end of the car off of Oceanic. Meanwhile, Pendulum and Supernova dragged him out from underneath. The waterbender was fine except the sizable dent in his chest plate. Toshinori sat in the back of an ambulance, an ice pack placed against his head. The healer on the scene had confirmed he had a severe concussion. No to mention 2 cracked ribs from being hit head-on by a car. With a simple touch it had been healed. Now all that remained was a rather unpleasant headache. Dave strode over to him, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets as he offered a small smile. We got the car back. It's a little banged up but in one piece. But she got away, Toshinori retorted dryly. Dave nodded as he glanced over at his invention. A tow truck would have to take it back considering the axle had been shattered. It would cost quite a bit. Working for a popular hero would help take care of most of the expenses though. Is that what's bothering you? That she got away? It's fine. We didn't know she had a strength quirk. We'll be prepared next time, Dave stated, trying to lift his friend's mood. However, it only seemed to make it even worse. I think I fought her before. A month or 2 ago, he frowned. Dave arched an eyebrow, trying to recall the hero's previous fights. The pawn shop thief? The one that choked you out? Yes, she got away then. And she got away tonight. It's becoming irritating. She's a simple thief. I should be able to catch her, he grumbled. Removing the ice pack, he sat up, stretching his arm as a dull throb shot through his right side. She's just lucky. As I said, we'll get her next time, Dave shrugged, sitting down beside him. The blonde hero heaved a sigh, glancing at his friend with a scowl. I hope so. She's becoming a bigger problem by the day. You had learned from your previous mistake, taking your own advice and working out more. You were far more limber than when you were almost last caught. Having taken up yoga and gymnastics was no easy task. For one, you were terrible at it. You fell over a lot. You had the bruises to prove it. You were getting better with each passing week though. And hey, your day life was busy now. You could afford everything you ever wanted now that you had a steady pay. There was one thing that irked you. You hadn't exactly lost much weight. You thought you might become slimmer with all the working out. Instead, you had gained weight and a bit of muscle too. It wasn't the worst thing that could happen, you suppose. You had just hoped for a more villainous figure. Although with the extra muscle you had gained, you could fight a heroes now and have a decent chance at winning. You tugged your boots on, tying the laces as you went over your mental checklist. Gear? In place and ready. Bag? In your top breathes cargo pocket. Grapple hook? On your belt. What? Charged to full power and already displaying the map to the pawn shop. Yes, a pawn shop. They had quite a few incredibly rare items in stock currently. 2 diamond-plated wristwatches, a ruby rose with an emerald stem, and a diamond necklace with a 14-karat gold chain. All would fetch a pretty price on the marketplace you had found. Nobody asked questions and you always got paid. Stretching your arms over your head, you stood up. You still lived in the abandoned apartment complex, but that was by choice. It was an address no one could trace. You knew every escape route and could collapse the building if need be. Plus, no nosy neighbors to turn you into the cops. As many people have said, Mama ain't raised no fool. You leaped out your window, shifting into invincible mode as you landed on the pavement below. You barely made a sound as you did. You'd even been practicing so you didn't leave craters. You kept to the back streets where it was darkest. Anyone who looked at you would assume you were a hero or sidekick. Because what villains strolled around in plain sight? As you had learned in the past few months, confidence was key when it came to this job. Nobody asked you what you were doing if you looked like you knew what you were doing. You continued down a few winding side streets, cutting through alleys until you arrived at the pawn shop. It was only 8 blocks over from where you lived. It was a high-end store for the neighborhood it was in. Bars over the windows and doors like the rest of the houses around it. You pulled out the crumpled piece of paper from your pocket, squinting to see the numbers in the dark. You had staked out the building for over 2 weeks, watching the owner type in the code every morning from a rooftop. You looked like a creepy stalker with your binoculars and notepad. But you got the passcode at least. You pressed in the digits, watching the lock turn green. You pulled open the gate to the door behind it. No big deal. You'd learned a nifty little trick for this. You took hold of the knob, crushing it in your grasp. You jostled it and the door popped open. While a lockpick was stealthier, you wanted them to know who had done this. You shut the gate and door behind you to the best of your abilities. No need for heavy hitter to get suspicious when he came by for patrol. You had robbed plenty of shops while a hero walked by. It helped to be silent and leave the door closed. They never suspected a thing. Your gaze landed on the glass cases that held your prizes hostage. Clenching your fist, you smashed the first case open. Your watch beeped, but you ignored it. You knew the alarm would sound. But you had already worked that into your schedule. You picked up the diamond necklace with the golden chain. You tilted it in your grasp, observing the glint of the diamond. It was beautifully cut and almost completely flawless. You placed it in one of your belt pouches, clipping it shut. You might just keep this one for yourself. You dropped a few more pieces of jewelry into your bag. A second beep sounded from your watch, much to your irritation. You glanced down at the screen and you felt your stomach drop. Heavy Hitter's insignia was far closer than you had anticipated and closing fast. If you wanted to be gone by the time he got here, you had to leave now. You hooked your bag to your waist, hopping up onto the counter. The shop's back door was jammed. A safety violation that wasn't going to be repaired for another week. So you'd have to take the air vent. Your apartment complex had plenty of old rickety vents to practice in. You were skilled at this sort of thing by now. You scaled the climb in 8 seconds, pushing the grate off the vent off to reveal the rooftop. Grinning to yourself, you wiggled halfway out of the vent when something tugged at you. You froze for a second, fearing it was a hero, until you felt the bag on your waist loosening. Wait, your loot. You jerked sideways, making a grab for it, only to ram your fingers against the edge of the vent. Oh, for heaven's sake. You forgot you still hadn't gotten out yet. The bag slid past your leg down the chute, the faint echoes of the contents clattering back into the shop below. Gritting your teeth, you dismissed it. This would just have to be a lesson learned. There was no way you could go back and get back up before Heavy Hitter arrived. You gripped the edge of the vent, pulling forward, only to realize you had run into a problem. You were stuck. Your climbing harness had made your waist too clunky to fit through, holding you hostage so you couldn't escape. You turned slightly, trying to push off of the ground to go backwards. But the harness didn't budge. If anything, it seemed to make the situation worse. You twisted sideways, trying to find one of the straps to loosen it. The buckles were inside the vent, strapped onto your thighs where you couldn't reach. Great. Just great. You glanced down at your watch to see Heavy Hitter's signal moving back on track. Well, at least you could take your sweet time in getting free now. The screen flashed bright red, warning you that you'd run out of invincibility. Hot fury flashed through you as you suppressed a curse. How had you run out? You hadn't done anything. No, that was a lie. You'd been practicing landing from high height today. You had really screwed up today. Growling, you dug your fingers into the vent sides. A new blip had appeared on your screen, though you hadn't noticed it yet during your fit of anger. The red dot on your watch was getting closer with each second, the annoying pinging only helping to further fuel your wrath. Wriggling like a crazed cat, you twisted every which way, pushing and pulling to no avail. You were so close to freedom. This stupid vent. Wrath. A very unpleasant crunch was heard as your invincibility activated for a split second. You froze, already knowing what had happened. In your anger, you had forced your quirk to activate. Clenching your jaw, you slowly glanced behind you. The sides of the vents had collapsed inward, crumpling around your waist like a belt. If you weren't stuck before, you were now. You went limp, glaring at the edge of the roof and what little of the horizon you could see. Fate did not seem to like you tonight. It seemed to hate your guts, personally kicking your teeth out whenever you finally got back up. Guess that's life. Swallowing back the lump in your throat, you tried to steady your breathing. You were not about to cry because you were having a bad day. Quit moping, you had to find a way out of this vent. Need some help? You died a little inside when you heard that voice. Could your night get any worse? Your head snapped up to see none other than Wonder Boy, All Might. You had finally done some research on the guy. And what you found was not only terrifying but pretty discouraging. The dude was a literal tank on legs. He'd taken plenty of hits and walked away unscathed. Not only that, he could one-punch his enemies. Well, most enemies. If you didn't count for yourself. He'd even managed to make it rain with a punch once. Or so the article had said. You weren't too sure about that. But in a Superman comic, he reversed time by spinning the planet backwards. It was just about as believable. You gave another pitiful attempt at freeing yourself, thrashing about in a mini tantrum. Slowly you calmed down, slumping against the roof once more. If anyone saw you, they'd say you looked like a pouting 4-year-old. Sighing, you mumbled a response. All Might arched an eyebrow, remaining where he was. What was that? Yes, I need help, you grumbled, lifting your head. He stepped forward, crouching beside you. Taking hold of both sides of the vent, he rolled it back like it was paper. You could feel your anxiety rising as he took hold of your arm, gently pulling you out and setting you on your feet. You were currently powerless. If he punched you, you'd burst like a fruit gusher. If he even sneezed in your general direction, you'd probably die. His strength was outmatched by anyone you'd seen so far. Now, are you going to come quietly, or will I have to fight you? Can't I just give you the necklace and you leave? You frowned, shuffling through your pockets. He shook his head, crossing his arms over his chest. No, you've robbed multiple places before this. Fine, if I give you the necklace, can I have a 30-second head start? You huffed. He seemed amused by your request, tilting his head to the side as if pretending to think it over. I'd barely call it a head start. You know I'd easily catch up to you. Yes or no? You snapped, holding out the diamond necklace you held. He took it from you, placing it in the strange compartment on his belt. Let's see if luck is still on your side, invincible. You felt a pang of pride at his use of your villain name. I mean, yeah, you used your villain name all the time, but to hear it from a pro hero? You were finally getting into the big leagues. You sprinted towards the edge of the roof, launching yourself forward. You managed to land on the fire escape on the opposite building, while also bruising a few ribs in the process. You scrambled to get down the stairs as fast as you could, jumping off the last landing. Taking a breath, you glanced at your watch. Not bad, you had 25 seconds left. You skidded around a street corner to find it empty. Of course, you had to choose 2 in the morning to make your debut. You really should do it when there was people around. You could disappear like last time, but no. You didn't want anyone to get hurt. You wanted to be incognito. A gust of wind nearly knocked you over as an outstretched arm close-lined you. With a startled GG, you landed flat on your back. Peering down at you was a smiling All Might. That's cheating. I had 12 seconds left. You hissed, forcing yourself upright. He arched an eyebrow at your comment, a smirk overtaking his features. Yes, but you never listened to the rules before. Why should I? He retorted cheekily. Oh, you really wanted to hit him with a lamppost right now. Now what? Are you going to arrest me? You muttered, rubbing your neck. You got lucky. He had merely held it out when he stopped. If he had actually swung his arm at you, he'd have broken something. That was the plan. He nodded, reaching for something on his hip. He revealed a set of very heavy-looking HNDCFFS. They looked like they'd drag you straight to the ground if he put those on you. It was a bit humorous, even if you were upset. He still thought you had super strength, which meant he didn't know about your time limit. You might be able to bluff your way out of this. He tapped the cuffs while starting towards you. Hold your hands out. No. He blinked, as if he hadn't heard you right. Raising your fists, you tried to think up a one-liner that would distract him. I took you down twice before I can do it again, you spat. Okay, not the best choice of words. That would just make him punch you. And you really didn't want to turn into a fruit gusher. He placed the cuffs back on his belt, taking a step back as he readied his stance. As I said, luck was on your side those times. Or you just SCK, you retorted. That caught him off guard. You moved before he could comprehend what you were doing. You jolted forward, grabbing his arm. You dropping to your knees as you dragged him with you. Your invincibility activated for a brief second as you threw him over your shoulder. It was the only possibly way you could have tossed the man over you. He felt heavier than a Viking car. How much did he weigh? You clambered to your feet, breaking into a sprint. You hadn't looked to see where he landed. You just knew you had 2 seconds to spare before he got back up. You fumbled through your belt, your hand meeting a bunch of smooth orbs. You were such an idiot. You had just bought these for this exact purpose. Turning on your heel, you found All Might only a few steps behind. He never saw what hit him. 3 flashbangs exploded in his face, making him halt in his tracks. A disgruntled yelp alerting you you'd hit your target. He was rubbing profusely at his face, attempting to make the stinging stop. This time you didn't feel as sorry. Maybe it was your sour mood at losing your loot and all the bad luck you'd had. Or maybe you truly were becoming more like a villain. Either way, he didn't catch you. By the time he regained his sight, you were long gone, leaving him to brood over his third loss against you yet again. Lost her again, huh? Shut up, Dave. You're underestimating her. I told you she has a good support tech. A villain like her is going to have gadgets. So, how'd she win this time? Flashbangs. Blinded me for a good minute, Toshinori growled, sitting down hard on the bench. Dave burst out laughing as his friend shot him a glare. Shields couldn't help it. It was so obvious why the blonde hero was upset. You're mad at her because she's defeated you without using her quirk. You haven't even managed one punch against her, am I right? No. I punched her 3 times the first time. Toshinori defended. Though it was partially true. If you had super strength, you would have punched him back. Or even thrown a car or 2 at him. Instead, it seemed like you wanted to toy with him, using simple tricks and chess to make him lose. It was irritating beyond belief. Not to mention you were a barely known thief. How was he supposed to be a top-ranked hero if he couldn't catch a petty criminal? Not only that, but he had honestly thought he'd had you tonight. He'd been overconfident and cocky. Now look where he was. Sitting in his friend's shop, face covered in soot, and eyes still burning from the mini-explosives. Why don't we try and figure out a little bit more about Invincible before we try again? That way I can make you something that'll help you catch her, Dave offered, patting Toshinori's shoulder. The giant glowered down at him, but sighed nonetheless. Fine, but I swear I will not take it easy next time. That girl is becoming a problem. If you say so, big guy. You sat on the edge of a rooftop near the carnival grounds. It had opened up around Christmas time and hadn't left yet. Most likely waiting until New Year's was over to leave. You didn't mind. It was a pretty sight with all of the lights and music. Not to mention it and all of your favorite desserts and food. You swung your legs happily, biting away at a funnel cake. Watching the fireworks show in the parking lot across from you. You had decided to skip your plan on robbing a nearby pawn shop. Instead, enjoying the street festivities and fireworks show the carnival was putting on. When you were little, your father refused to take you to any fireworks, saying they were a waste of time and too loud. Except he wasn't here to tell you how to live or how you were failing in life. When he threw you out, you had no idea this is where your life would lead. This New Year's brought a lot of new things. Not all good things, but new things. You leaned back, crumpling the sugary napkin you held. Your unloved hand just as sticky as the paper it held. You stuffed it into your pocket, opting not to toss it behind you. Nobody ever came up here, so it'd just blow away eventually. Might as well chuck it in a trash can on your way home instead. You never heard the soft thud of the silhouette landing behind you. Not until they plopped down beside you. You scrambled away, eyes wide as you stared at the costumed figure. The 2 cat-like ears of their mask would have made them appear friendly, if you didn't account for the giant fangs that made up the jaw. They looked like a saber-toothed tiger on steroids. You moved to jump off the roof. Your instincts telling you to run, but they didn't seem hostile. You were naive enough to stay frozen in place, waiting to see how the situation would play out, whether they were friend or foe. Hi. I'm Sabretooth, as you can tell. Call me Saber. You're invincible, right? Course you are. The mask gives it away, the teen rambled. He seemed almost the same age as you. At least you think he was. It was hard to tell with the mask on. His voice was a higher pitch than anyone you knew your age. You weren't sure how to react to this guy's sudden introduction. Say hello? Demand to know what he was doing? May I help you? You questioned in bewilderment. You immediately cringed at how uncertain you sounded. Great way to make first impressions. Oh yeah, I wanted to find you to ask if you wanted to be partners. You know, partners in crime. I'm a new third in the area. Thought it'd be more fun with dos instead of uno. You stared at the masked man before you. Did he just dash? What in the world? Was he on something? He placed his hands on his knees, leaning towards you. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? He snickered. His mask inches away from yours. Why did everyone you meet have the weirdest personalities? First Wonder Boy, now this guy. No, I'm just a little startled. I'm hardly any good at burgling. So why do you want to be my partner? 'Cause I'm new too. We can learn together. Plus, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just kinda wreck stuff instead of take it. So my heists always end poorly, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. He seemed sheepish to admit it. I don't know. You can't learn much from me, Yu frowned, trying to size him up. He was on the scrawny side. Thin and gangly with little to no muscle. Yet his costume was intricate and had to be tailored to fit him. Nobody's suite fit that well without a support member backing them up on the battlefield. He certainly wasn't a newbie. Ah, come on. You're at least semi-famous. I mean, All Might fights you all the time. He pouted, crossing his arms over his chest. He seemed far too childish to be a real villain. Maybe he was a rich kid trying to play bad guy. Hero was too glamorous for him, and villain came with more risk. That was almost your backstory to the T. Let me think about it, you muttered, pulling your glove out of your pocket. Once you strapped it back on, you scooted to the edge of the roof. All the while Sabretooth was watching you like a hawk. Alrighty, see you around, Invincible. He waved. You hopped over the side of the roof without saying goodbye. Something was off about this guy. I mean, yeah, you were a villain too. And you weren't exactly the best person around. But you weren't a villain to make friends. You were a villain because. Why were you a villain? You hit the ground without a sound. Standing up, you scanned the street to make sure no one had taken notice. Anyone who passed you a glance was either too drunk or too awed by the fireworks to care. You easily strolled down the sidewalk, making it back to your home without so much as a hero to interrupt you. Sabretooth's eyes glinted beneath his mask as they trailed after you. The gray vanished from your skin the second you had stood up from your jump. It was a 3-story fall. About 30 feet, and you didn't even sprain an ankle. An invincibility quirk, as he expected. How exciting, the teen grinned. Sharp canines hidden beneath his mask. He backflipped onto his feet. Ever the show-off he needed to perform all his fates with flair. Even while talking to you. A low-life and pathetic excuse of a villain. Yet, an interest to his MSTR. Casting one last glance in your direction, he let out a laugh. Oh, this will be too easy. A tiny little mouse that'll be caught in my claws in no time. He tittered with glee. He darted over the rooftops. A mere blur against the night as he moved. Returning to a lair that would soon become a nightmare for you. Your costume had been torn during last week's heist when you were stuck in the air duct. Your climbing harness had also been ruined. The carabiner had completely snapped in half. Not to mention you lost quite a bit of your equipment when your pockets tore open when you were flailing about. So back to the repair tech you went. To the run-down neighborhood where her lab was located. She was an interesting person and nice despite the type of people she worked with. You had paid her half up front the day before, and had just finished paying her after you picked up your newly repaired costume. While she wasn't the most grand underground tech, she made incredibly durable equipment. At an affordable price as well. It was a win-win situation. You'd learned that you could trust her to an extent. To be honest, it was refreshing to have someone that wasn't going to stab you in the back the second you let your guard down. You carefully placed your mask into your duffel bag on top of your suite, zipping it closed as you glanced up at the older woman. She was leaning against one of her work tables with a small smile. Right. You had to finish the payments. You shuffled through your briefs pockets, pulling out your wallet. As promised, here's the other half of the $1,000, you said, handing her the $100 bills. You never kept a card on you anymore. For one, cards were traceable, and two, you would have to set up a bank account. If you did that, your parents or anyone else who questioned your disappearance could find you. Currently, you'd rather not be found. She took the bills from you, counting it over before nodding. I wish all of my clients were as reliable as you, she hummed. You arched an eyebrow as you slung your duffel bag over your shoulder. You knew underground support tech was a dangerous job. Far more dangerous than being a villain. They could be dubbed loose ends by clients. While you knew she didn't have the best of clientele, you didn't want to see anything happen to her. Having troubles? She seemed startled by your question. Her expression changing from surprise to nervous appreciation. She shook her head, giving you a shy smile. As if she were attempting to hide something. Nothing I can't take care of. Have a good day, she replied, ushering you towards the front hallway. You did as she bid, not wanting to hold her up in case she had another client on the way. You too stay safe, you called, shutting the door behind you. You made your way down the steps to the street below. You were too busy thinking over your plans for the week to see the silhouette concealed against the wall. That is, until it leaped forward at you. Hey, remember me? A voice all but shouted from beside you. Your skin flashed gray as your quirk activated on instinct. You turned on your heel about to take a swing when you spotted the familiar face. What? It's me. Sabretooth, we talked around New Year's Eve. You can call me Cameron though, Sabretooth asked, pulling his mask up. He was beaming from ear to ear. You weren't sure what he was expecting in response. You were not about to drop your real name. There's a reason for having a secret identity. What set you on edge was the fact he'd either followed you or tracked you down. You weren't sure which one made you more uneasy. Sabretooth seemed to sense your discomfort and alarm at his presence. He shrugged it off, placing his hands on his waist. I get it, why trust a weird guy running around in a mask? I'm sure it's hard to trust me. Especially in our line of work, am I right? He joked. Instead of responding, you gave him an odd look as you continued down the sidewalk. He followed after you, trailing behind like a puppy. Look, I've been on my own for about 2-3 years. I hate it. I've had no one to talk to or trust. I've only had myself to rely on. Then I heard about you and you seemed like a good choice for an ally. You have a code of morals. You only burgle and you try to avoid fights, he explained, walking backwards so he could face you. In a manner of speaking that was true. You didn't go out of your way to start fights. However, on a bad day you might have purposefully run into a sidekick or two in order to blow off some steam. By blow off some steam you really meant bash them into a wall and fight toe-to-toe. You wouldn't call it evil, but it certainly wasn't nice. Sabretooth had to know about your little scuffles if he knew about your heists. So why didn't he mention those as well? A strange sensation crawled over your skin. Similar to when you walked out of a cold room into warm air. It had your hair standing on end. So, will you be my partner? He smiled cheerfully. Warmth snaked through your chest, one of compassion and kindness. Not of your own accord. It felt forced, but that thought didn't last long. Your mind wandered to the fact that while Sabretooth might be obnoxious and odd, he wasn't threatening. He was nice and he hadn't given you any reason to doubt him. The thoughts seemed more like whispers made to help sway your mind. In the end they did. I'll decide after one heist together, just to see how well we work together, you sighed. You were only saying it to get him off your back. He wasn't exactly threatening, he was just annoying in his behavior. Overly energetic, more so than anyone you've ever known. He was only a kid, you reminded yourself. Then again, you weren't much older than him. You were both just trying to find someone that could watch your back. It wouldn't hurt to give him a chance. He hugged you, which only weirded you out even more. Thanking you repetitively before disappearing back in the direction he'd come. Something felt off as you made your way homeward. Perhaps it was the slight buzz in your ears. Or the odd tingling sensation in the back of your mind. Like the beginnings of an ice cream headache. You shook your head, letting out a slow sigh. It was probably just allergies, the weather was changing after all, and it was mid-spring. It was just your mind playing tricks on you. Nothing to worry about. Dave sprinted through the hallways of the hero headquarters. The large base making it difficult to get to any meeting on time. Yet he arrived. A little breathless and disheveled, but he had made it. The group of heroes turned to face him. Looks of confusion rippling through the room. Dave gave a nervous smile as he pushed a strand of stray hair behind his ear. All Might sends his apologies. He got caught up, I'll be taking his place, he explained, taking a seat at the far end of the table. A few nods were exchanged as Brainiac strode through the room, handing out a small file in his hand. As you know, there have been multiple critical injuries to villains in the last few months. As for why, I'm about to explain. Open your folders and read the first page, the cyborg stated, stopping at the head of the table. Dave did as he was told, flipping the vanilla envelope open to see a rap sheet, included with a photo of a young teen. He was smiling cheerfully, tossing up a peace sign as he stuck his tongue out. Playfully. It seemed a bit cliché if you ask him. But the crimes in and of themselves were what made him doubt the picture belonged to the boy above. Assault and battery. Murder in the first degree. Grand theft auto. Dealing of trigger. Attempted murder. Attempted assault. Theft of a bank. Theft of museum art. Tax evasion. Dave had to fight a snort at the last crime. It seemed a little odd to include that on top of everything else. He pushed the sheet aside to get a better idea as to who this person was. He seemed to be a high-ranked villain. Name: Cameron Potter. Hair color: eye color: orange. Age: 17. Height: 5 feet 8 inches. Alias: Sabretooth. Physical manifestation: feline attributes. Ability to grow needle-thin claws. Long sharp canines. Cat eyes that see in the dark. Heightened speed and agility. Quirk 2, silver tongue. Most likely acquired through black market means. He can talk anyone into doing anything. Similar to hypnosis, he can only talk you into doing something you would do. Often uses this to get lower tier villains to do his dirty work. Uses this on hostages as well. Dave arched an eyebrow in intrigue. Hypnosis? That was a new quirk. He had seen a few brainwashing one but never hypnosis. This was certainly new. Oceanic tossed the folder onto the table. His helmet hissing as water bubbled in his helm. He seems harmless enough. He doesn't have the best track record. Arrested on 8 attempts out of the 12 he's committed, the hero huffed. Brainiac didn't seem the least bit fazed by Oceanic's comment. Each time he recruited more villains to his group and then promptly escaped with all of them from the prison he was in, Brainiac retorted. Dave couldn't help but feel unnerved. This was just a boy. Merely 17 and he was already so well known? Why are you worried about him now? Heavy Hitter questioned, flipping through the rest of his file. Brainiac's chest glowed to life as a projection appeared on the wall. Pictures of battered and bruised villains appeared. All on stretchers, in ambulances, or hospitalized. Half of his gang has showed up quirkless in the last month. A few of them were even killed in the process. Dave felt his stomach lurch into his throat. He didn't like where this was going. Neither did anyone else, it seemed. The entire room had gone silent. Tension beginning to build as looks were exchanged. You think he's working for an underground quirk harvesting ring? Supernova asked. Her glowing liquid hair seeming to dim in apprehension. Brainiac nodded as he turned off the projector in his chest. Glancing over the table, he made certain he had everyone's attention. It's the only possible explanation. Sabretooth has no loyalties. He plays for the sake of the game. If he continues on, there won't be any villains in the next 3 months, he replied solemnly. Heavy Hitter shrugged, cupping his hands behind his head. All right, and why is that our problem? Because we are heroes. It is our job to protect others, Supernova interjected. Heavy Hitter rolled his eyes at her response. I don't protect scum like villains. He spat. In an instant the two were fighting. Standing chest to chest as they snarled at one another. Ever since Dave arrived he had realized it was better to keep the two separated. But today was worse than usual. So you don't care if they die? That their DNA is torn apart so someone else can take their power to sell to another villain? She hissed. The room was starting to grow hot as the number 4 hero's body shimmered. Maybe now was not the time to get the living human son angry. Dave cleared his throat, gaining all eyes on him. Supernova's glare was fixated on him now. He swallowed the lump in his throat as he tried to speak. His voice coming out an octave too high. Either way, our concern should be the harvesters themselves. What's to stop them from going after civilians or even heroes? Think about it. They're going after villains for a reason. Because nobody cares. That got everyone back on the same page. Dave internally sighed in relief. The feud had been settled without bloodshed. Alert the other heroes to be on the lookout for Sabretooth and anyone who might be associated with him. He isn't well known, but a recent picture of his costume will be given to all heroes. Brainiac hummed, pushing the doors open. It seemed he didn't want to be cooped up the rowdy heroes any more than he had to be. However, he stopped Dave before he could exit. The other heroes had already filed out, leaving the brunette alone with the cyborg. I'm trusting you will be able to tell All Might, yes? I know he is only touring here, but we need all the help we can get, he frowned. Dave gave a quick thumbs up. Of course. I'll let him know once he gets back. The heist was supposed to be simple, but with some persuasion from Sabretooth you had stepped up your game. He had proposed that since there was now two of you should aim higher. Maybe not a bank or anything, but something in a higher price range. Which is why you had chosen to rob a museum. You weren't sure why you agreed, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. You were both sneaking along back alleyways, trying to stay out of sight as people went about their late-night outings. Despite it being midnight, people were still busy as ever. That was one thing about living in a big city. No one ever seemed to sleep. At least there were less people out right now than during the day. Sabretooth was practically bouncing circles around you as you slunk down the street, making certain to stay in the shadows and stay out of sight. However, that was hard to do with Sabretooth rambling at his leisure as he talked about anything and everything. Didn't this guy need to breath? So, anyways, there's the museum has this art gallery that's portraying these cool rubies and stuff. I know you prefer jewelry to money. That's why I thought you'd agree to this. Plus, who can deny a museum heist? That's like #1 bad guy rule, he explained, coming to a stop in front of you. You had to halt to avoid running into him. You resisted the urge to tell him to shut up. The whole point of being stealthy was so you wouldn't be caught. Sabretooth, if you don't lower your voice, we'll be caught, you hissed. He crossed his arms across his chest, giving a small huff. It'll be fine. I got these cool gadgets to stop the alarms and cut through the glass. Unless you want to break it. I love to break stuff. He chittered gleefully. You looked up to see the plaque beside the door to the back entrance. The Lin-Manuel's Museum, employees only. You peered over at your gleeful companion, arching an eyebrow. Better put those gadgets to good use then. This isn't a low-tier pawn shop, you retorted. He stepped in front of the door, tugging his mask down over his face, his fingertips growing to 3-inch needle-like claws. He pressed both his pointer fingers into the lock, fumbling with them as he attempted to pick the lock. You were going to comment that wouldn't work, until the door popped open with a soft click. You stared with wide eyes. He'd barely taken 2 seconds. From out of his belt he pulled a small black cube. It was sleek and metallic in appearance. He hurled it inside, a flash coming from the room. What was that? Cool. It worked. The alarms are all frozen so it won't detect anything we do, he snickered. Though instead of darting inside he waited for you. Your gut warned you it might be trap. That he was setting you up so when you walked in the alarm would sound. You awkwardly stepped past him, expecting the worst. Yet nothing happened. You stood in shock as Sabretooth pranced past you. You trailed behind him, still wary of what might happen. You strolled through large open hallways. Paintings, sculptures, and appealing art pieces littered the walkways. You wandered about them, taking in the beauty. Sabretooth sauntered in between the items like one might browse for the ripest fruit at a store, picking them up to examine them before going to look at the next trinket. When you finally entered the jewelry exhibit, you felt your jaw drop. When he said jewels, he really meant jewels. These weren't some store-bought diamonds. These were intricately cut, almost flawless in every way. The stones weren't the only gorgeously crafted items either. There was plenty of gold and silver smelted and molded with the finest of craftsmanship. Sitting in the center of the room was a jewel-encrusted crown. Diamonds embedded in soft blue velvet. Garnet vines snaking about it in a floral design. Topaz sunflowers sprouting from the glimmering vines. Around it were stunning earrings carved into cobras with their hoods flared. A diamond bust of Aphrodite. A golden griffin foot clutching a ruby heart. These all looked priceless. You couldn't sell these on the black market. You just couldn't. Sabretooth sliced the crown's case's sides, the glass sliding off and shattering on the floor. He removed his mask, clipping it onto his waist. He scooped up the crown, placing it neatly atop his spiked black hair. Ta-da! I'm king now. You felt that familiar warm sensation spreading through your chest, though it felt less artificial this time. You stepped closer to the Aphrodite statue. Made out of sapphire, the deep blues resembling the night sky. It was impressive in appearance and beauty. It did the goddess justice. Sabretooth's voice broke you from your thoughts. And what about you? What about the earrings? They'd go with your eyes. Then again, red goes with almost everything if it's the right shade, He tooted, examining case after case. He stopped just out of your peripheral range. You were still transfixed on the Aphrodite bust, trying to figure out how they made it look so real, so human. It was as if she might start breathing any second. I know. This is what you need. Glass broke as you turned to find Sabretooth behind you. How did he move so fast and so quietly? It was unnerving. He held up a golden ring with a large pearl in the center. Small diamonds encrusting the sides. You can punch a hero's lights out with this. Here, I'll go find you something else, he hummed, disappearing from sight. The ring might be expensive, but it was hideous in design. Far too large and clunky. If you were going to steal something, it wouldn't be that. You turned to one of the cases holding a bounty of necklaces. These were more your speed. You raised your fist, breaking the glass in a swift punch. Reaching inside, you plucked up a small silver chain necklace. On the end was a pink taphite moon. Definitely more your style. It was simple and perfect. Sabretooth returned, hiding something behind his back. He seemed smug about whatever it was, and you were starting to feel uneasy again. You ready to see what I found you? He inquired, shoulders hunching as he tried to contain himself. You arched an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. You knew this was a bad idea. You shouldn't have agreed to come in with him. He was probably going to stab you or something. What is it? You replied, trying to appear calm. From behind his back, he pulled out a diamond-encrusted All Might. It had to be about 10 inches tall. Standing on a golden pedestal. Topaz, rubies, sapphires, and such making up his color scheme. You didn't know why you found it so humorous, but you did. And you were laughing. It seemed ridiculous. Something so priceless made to reflect the Wonder Dork himself. He wasn't even that big a hero in America. Sabretooth was laughing just as hard as you. They have an entire collection of every hero imaginable. Want it? There's like 2 others. No joke. They even have all of Supernova's costumes from Sidekick to now, he said, handing you the figurine, not waiting to see if you'd grab it. You tucked the necklace into one of your pockets, taking hold of the figurine. He tugged on your arm, already ranting about something else he found fascinated. You gazed down at the crystalline figure you held. Maybe you would keep this. Just for the humor of it. Oh look, they have the entire Hamilton cast's costumes on exhibit. I want to dress up as Burr. Hold my crown. The sky outside your apartment was a dull gray. Thick clouds had been blocking out most of the sunlight for half the day. You'd put off going out because it had been drizzling for almost the entire morning. Sabretooth sat sprawled out on the couch, lazily flipping through a fashion magazine he had brought over with him. You discovered he was actually a year younger than you, making him 17, soon to be 18 in the next week. The same age you were when you were thrown out of the house. You never really thought to pry into his backstory. It never came up, and you respected his privacy. After all, he never questioned you about yours. He never thought to ask your real name, and you were grateful. Being a villain came without trust. Not that you trusted him, far from it. It might sound horrible, but Sabretooth was a scapegoat. If a hero was after you, all you had to do was slow Sabretooth down enough to let him get caught. It wasn't the most civilized way to think. But then again, you were a villain. Weren't you? Of course you were. Why else were you stealing things? Shaking your head, you strapped your gloves into place. It was almost 9:30, but the lights on the street made it seem closer to mid-evening. It might be a little early for you to be out thieving. Under the cover of darkness, it was easiest to get away with your heists. It irked Sabretooth that you never tried a day heist. Though he understood your reasoning, he saw no point in it. You had him now, you could easily pull off a 2-man job. So what if a hero showed up? You could both easily fight any hero off. To which you countered by listing off every top 10 hero who was far too powerful for either of you to handle. To which he begrudgingly agreed. While you had grown to like Sabretooth, his behavior was a tad erratic and he tended to ramble. But in an odd way, it was nice to have the company. Plus, you had someone to watch your back. He appeared to have full trust in you, which made you feel awful for the way you were using him. He noticed you pulling your climbing gear on and immediately sat up. Finally, what are we doing tonight? Something big, I hope. You never do anything fun, he huffed, pulling his mask into place. You rolled your eyes, running over your inventory list in your head. I told you I don't do big. What about a small big heist? Unless you have a TARDIS, I don't think so, you snorted, pulling your mask down to obscure your face. Sabretooth perched on the arm of the couch, seeming to vibrate with newfound energy. What I mean is, we swipe one of the fanciest cars we can find. Go for a joyride. Stop at a museum or large jewelry store when we're done. You know, baby steps towards bigger things, he hummed. You were going to object until he put his hands up before you could argue with him. No one will get hurt. I know your number one rule. No civilians involved. Which is why we do everything at night, right? Right. He declared, leaping towards the door. Turn to look at you, tilting his head to the side. We won't even break any of your rules. Plus, you have more fun, he giggled, darting into the hallway. Well, he did have a point. Nobody was out really since it had been raining all day, and it was 9 o'clock, so the civilian traffic would be light. And auto theft wasn't that far a step from jewelry. It was a step down considering your history. In the end you agreed. After all, what was the harm in a little drag racing? This was California. People did it all the time. Even motorcyclists did it. Sabretooth helped you make your selection. Choosing a dealership across town known for selling cars to celebrities and the top heroes of the world. They prided themselves on having the fastest, most secure cars. Not tonight. You meandered through the parking lot. Each car seemed to be even shinier than the last. Neon bright colors. Flashy tire rims. Light up undersides. Stereo in back. These were definitely something worth stealing. Sabretooth was bouncing around a few rows over when something caught his eye. He flailed his arms, attempting to draw your attention. You rolled your eyes, unable to stop from smiling. His energetic behavior was contagious. You strode over to the neon green car he was pointing at. Oh my gosh. Look, it's a Ferrari. We have to take it, he begged, tugging on your arm. A habit he had formed the first day he met you. You shook your head, peering over your shoulder at the car you had been eyeing. A black Corvette with neon yellow racing stripes. I'm liking the Corvette there more. Then what about a race? I take the Ferrari, you take the Corvette. Whoever makes it to the Halsey jewelry store decides what we take tonight. He grinned. Sabretooth had discovered one of your weaknesses early on. You could never back down after someone told you you couldn't do something. It usually led to some daring fates. One of which involved you headbutting a wall in order to escape Oceanic. You nudged Sabretooth's arm to get his attention. Hand me one of the starters and prepare to lose, you grinned. He handed you a small box the size of your thumb before you both darted to the cars of your choice. Pressing the cube starter to the keyhole, you pressed the side. With a soft click, the door popped open. You didn't know who his tech agent was, but they were amazing. Your support tech had gone missing about 2 weeks ago. You'd most likely have to find a new one soon. You climbed into the front seat, tugging the seatbelt on. You might be a villain, but you preferred your brains where they were. You pressed the starter cube to the ignition key port. Pressing the top down, it latched onto it. With a whir, the car sprung to life. The engine purred as you pulled out towards the sidewalk. You had taken into consideration the need for a quick getaway. So Sabretooth had sliced the bar off the gate before you entered. There was nothing stopping you from stealing the cars. You don't think you'd ever been more excited in your life. Sabretooth pulled up beside you, waving from his open window. Count of 3. He yelled to be heard. You smirked, flooring it before he could realize what you were doing. You had no intent in losing. While Ferraris were more appealing, Corvettes were faster. Sabretooth's car could be seen in your rear-view mirror due to your head start. He was doing his best to catch up. Though he wasn't that bad of a driver, he had to try and dodge traffic to get to you. Then he did something you didn't quite expect. He chose the more reckless pathway. He was driving on the left side of the road. There weren't many cars out because of how late it was, but there were still people out. It gave him an advantage considering everyone was leaving to go home rather than coming back into town. For a brief second you contemplated calling off the race. You weren't about to risk people getting hurt. That's when the warm feeling thrummed to life in your chest. It was a familiar thing by now. Almost addictive. It washed away any thought about others' safety. The only thing that mattered was the little race between the two of you. He had caught up to you. blowing you a kiss as he passed you by. Okay, no more Mrs. Nice Lady. You shifted gears, revving your engine in the process. He managed to keep up with you for another 2 minutes. However, after a few turns and shortcuts through back alleys, he was no longer on your tail. Your foot was practically pressed to the floor. The speedometer read 210. You'd won by a mile. Halsey's jewelry shop came into view and your pride only grew. No sign of Sabretooth. You'd beat him with no troubles at all. You drifted into a U-turn, coming to a screeching halt in the middle of the road. The Corvette jerked to the side, rocking back and forth for a second from how hard you braked. Okay, maybe your high-speed stops needed work. Your headlights illuminated the empty road where Sabretooth would come from. You waited a few minutes before the adrenaline started to wear down, along with the hazy feeling in your chest. Maybe a side effect of your quirk? But you hadn't experienced it before. You shook your head trying to clear your muddled thoughts. When you looked up, the road was still empty. It had been 15 minutes. Where was Sabretooth? It wasn't like him to give up easily either. You both had competitive stracks that had a tendency to get you into trouble. There was no way he would just give up. Not unless a thud sounded beside your window and you almost keeled over. The only thing you could make out through the tinted window was a strange yellow belt with a triangle compartment on the front. You felt like you should recognize it, but no thoughts came to mind. Up until the thing spoke, that is. I see you have a thing for cars, a familiar voice called. You froze on instinct. Oh, CRP. You'd almost forgotten about him. You pursed your lips, rolling down the window to see All Might. He had to crouch in order to peer through the window at you. It didn't help that the car was low to the ground either. You hadn't run into him in 2 months. You'd thought he'd gone back to Japan. Apparently not, otherwise he wouldn't be here. Your brain attempted to restart itself after the shock of seeing Gim again, forcing you to say something to the hero. Yeah, you mumbled. He gripped the handle of the door, opening it, motioning for you to move. Great, you hadn't expected on being stopped by any hero. You had to come up with a plan on the spot. What about your gear? You'd mostly packed climbing stuff or small gadgets that formed liquid attacks. While oil might be slippery, you doubted you could fool the guy into tripping in a puddle of it. You'd given all of your explosives and offensive stuff to Sabretooth. H was the fighter out of the two of you after all. All Might's voice broke through your thoughts. Why don't you step out of the car? Or are you going to hit me again? A grin formed on your lips as you looked up to meet his gaze. That had actually been pretty funny once you got over the fear you had killed him. It was one of your best memories besides stealing the car. I'll get out. You just break this car, it's not made from some super alloy, you scoffed, stepping under his arm. You had gained quite a bit of confidence in the 5 months Toshinori knew you, going from a frantic thief to a cocky villain. It was irksome considering you gained your confidence from escaping his grasp all the time. This time no tricks. Give me your belt, he instructed. You kept checking your surroundings, hoping Sabretooth would show up to help. No such luck, however. In the end, you had no choice but to unbuckle your utility belt, handing it over to the hero. He hooked it onto his waist, swapping it out for the heavy restrainer cuffs he had strapped to his hip. No, come on. You had been doing so well for once in your stupid life. Why did you have to get caught now? You were actually enjoying your life. The cuffs clicked around your wrists, almost dragging you down. A knot of dread formed in your stomach as you stared down at the cuffs. You could have tried to fight him off if you hadn't sparred all morning with Sabretooth. Your time limit had run out. You had gotten too cocky, and in the end it had gotten you caught. All Might took hold of your arm, holding you close to his side in case you got any ideas. He pressed his earpiece, signaling someone on the other end. Dave, I have Invincible. Could you contact a nearby patrol car? Thanks, I will. Was that his sidekick's name? It was so generic. He should at least have a code name. If he went around using his real name, he'd get hurt by a villain eventually. All Might started to move not long after his phone call. Come on, thief. You're not getting away tonight, he snapped, dragging you alongside him. You did your best to make it more difficult. While your quirk was partially suppressed, you couldn't use it to your full capability. So you took to turning your bones invincible. It made you far more dense as you dragged your feet, adding on at least 100 extra pounds to yourself. For someone with super strength, it wouldn't be a problem to keep forcing you to walk. But it would be irritating to do so. You could already see his smile vanishing as his grip shifted. Take that, Wonder Boy. He could suffer while he made your life miserable. You entered onto the sidewalk where the street more abuzz than where your car was. A movie theater had just let out from a late-night showing. Small groups of friends and couples strolling away on the opposite side of the street. And lo and behold, who was chilling on the hood of a flaming green Ferrari? Sabretooth sat with a crowd of girls around him. His mask clipped to his hips so he could talk to them directly. They were obviously taken in by his good looks and cheerful disposition. That rat had sold you out. It looks like he had used you for a scapegoat instead. You couldn't exactly blame him for it. He was a villain just like you. You locked eyes and you shot him a death glare. He instead gave you a thumbs up. Wait, what? Hey, look. It's All Might. He shouted, pointing to the pro-hero. You could feel the blonde tensing beside you, the hand on your arm tightening slightly as the group of girls turned to face you both. It was like something out of a horror movie. Shrieking, sleek bodies launching straight for you. Incoherent voices talking over one another. Shoulders and elbows ramming you away from All Might. One girl going as far as you grabbed the shoulder strap of your costume and dragging you backwards. You were all but thrown to the outskirts of the group. You were standing on the edge of the road now. Wait, had you just been rescued? All Might stood trying to explain that he couldn't talk. He needed to catch a criminal. You broke into the widest grin imaginable. Oh my gosh. For once being popular was working against his advantage. You had to savor this, even for a tiny moment. All Might caught sight of you 2 yards away, and you made sure to give him your best smile. After all, this would be the 7th time you escaped him. You could see the irritation in his face as his jaw clenched. Sabretooth was gesturing wildly to you again. He had buckled up in the driver's seat of his car. All Might was starting to get his point across, and the girls were starting to part like the Red Sea. Oh, Sirpy. Time to go. You bolted across the road, all but lunging through the open passenger window. You landed halfway in your seat and Sabretooth's lap. He was already rambling away as you sat up. I saw him following your car when I stopped to avoid hitting a deer. Thought I'd prepare to help you escape. I mean, you're good, but All Might is faster. So, I decided why not use his own fan base to slow him down. He explained, turning off the road into a Denny's parking lot. Adrenaline was coursing through your veins, making it hard to think straight. Or was it the hazy feeling in your chest again? Why are we stopping? You questioned, turning to face him. He pried the starter cube from the key port and the engine died instantly. We have to make a run for it. He'll be looking for the car. We're not the strongest villains, so fighting won't do us any good. And you're kinda stuck in HNDCFFS. Make a run for it? He suggested hopefully. For once he actually looked uncertain, even a little nervous. It looked like you would have to be the leader in this situation. Yeah, make a run for it. Meet back at the fort. It'd be easier to split up, you nodded, though you weren't certain who you were agreeing with. You both exited the vehicle, Sabretooth pausing for a brief second in the doorway. You didn't notice since you were already halfway across the tiny strip mall. Your adrenaline and fear-addled mind had one focus. Sabretooth's quirk helped to heighten that instinct. He watched you disappear into the night with the hint of a smirk. You'd grown in the last few months he'd been training you. You knew how to blend in better with the shadows. To keep yourself on the down low. How to make others perceive you as a sidekick instead of a villain. You were the perfect little project to test his hypnosis quirk on. You did everything he suggested and you had no idea. Sabretooth was practically squealing with excitement. He had your full trust and you didn't even know it. You were going to be such an easy catch. Far easier than any of the other idiotic villains he'd lured into his traps. So vulnerable and naive. It was almost too easy. He spared one last look in your direction as he made his own escape. After all, he didn't want to get caught before the plan was set into action. Dave watched Toshinori pace back and forth. He hadn't attempted to talk to the blonde just yet. He seemed pretty worked up, so he just let him go. Besides, it was pretty entertaining to watch him fume over losing to a common thief. Dave had to give you credit, you weren't stupid. You had gotten better skills and even had a good tech support. The two main things a villain needed to become great at not getting caught. While Toshinori no longer underestimated your fighting skills, he wasn't paying attention to you. He still didn't know your ability and he had no idea what your MO was. Dave had been recording your track record to find your weakness. He had plenty of evidence showing that while you were a part-time thief, if you made the choice to go full villain, you'd be terrifyingly good at it. He'd found out you were getting bolder in your endeavors and that you were gaining more traction in the underground world. You were taking bigger steps. Robbing an art museum and getting a sidekick? Toshinori wasn't taking into account that you were getting worse as a villain. He was trying to give you a benefit of a doubt, even if he didn't know it. Dave placed his chin in his hand, trying to hide his smile. Toshinori had managed to cuff you. He'd finally caught you. He had even had the cops on the way. And then you, Toshinori, couldn't believe it. This was the 7th time. The 7th time. Not only that, but you'd gained a sidekick. You were getting much better at what you did. He couldn't even locate you for an entire month. The only way he even knew it was you in the car was because he saw you through the window when he jumped down. How could a group of girls cause so many problems? This was getting ridiculous. You're wearing a hole in the floor with your pacing, Dave commented, pulling him from his thoughts. Toshinori paused, glancing over at his smirking friend. Dave hopped off of the table, walking past him towards the door. Just let her go. She's a small-time thief. She doesn't hurt anyone and she's completely harmless. The only person she's ever hurt is you. Besides, the worst injury she gave you was a couple bruises and a concussion, he said, entering the small building. Toshinori let out a heavy sigh. Maybe he was overthinking this. After all, Dave was right. You were harmless, but exceptionally annoying. Sabretooth had finally managed to convince you to do a day heist. Nothing big and no weapons. You had bluffed your way through it. What you hadn't expected was for another villain to come in. He was raving mad, spewing nonsense about doomsday and bringing about the purification of all evil. He took one look at you and Sabretooth and proclaimed you in need of cleansing, which was why you were now running for your lives down Kitteridge Street. You were running as fast as you possibly could, Sabretooth shrieking beside you as he dodged laser beams. This guy was nuts. He wasn't even aiming. He was just firing random bursts of red beams. He was going to hit someone. Maybe kill someone. You needed to get him away from the buildings and people. A flash of light from above and a fireball struck the villain down. Good. Heroes had arrived. Wait, heroes had arrived? You skidded to a stop, grabbing Sabretooth's arm. Supernova flew past, her attention focused solely on the man behind you. That worked to your advantage. You could easily slip away now. Or do you thought? The villain was still standing, much to Supernova's astonishment. His shoulder was a bit singed, but that didn't seem to bother him. I am here to cleanse the world of all impurities. No one shall defy Optic's purifying beam. Those villains are dirted souls. He roared, launching a volley of beams at the Sun Hero. You ducked behind a car in time to avoid being disintegrated. Okay, Nutjob was still after you both. This was not a good day. Sabretooth sat beside you looking distressed. He was practically hugging the bag of jewelry you had stolen earlier. You nudged his arm, pointing to the back alley across from you. Go, I'll distract him. Get to safety, you whispered, pushing him forward. But what about you? We can both run for it. Supernova can handle him, he scowled. You would have agreed, but you felt responsible. The villain was causing chaos because of you. Wasn't it only fair that you helped stop him? The familiar hazy feeling came back as you pondered over what to do. You were a villain. Why should you help? Supernova was the 4th top-ranked hero in America. She would do fine fighting some rambling laser-shooting guy. Taking a deep breath, you nodded, following close to Sabretooth as you slunk through the alleyway. You were almost to freedom. All you had to do was pass under one of the overpass bridges to get back to the west side of town. Stop right there, scum. Optic snarled. Your eyes widened as you shoved Sabretooth away from you, leaning as far back as possible as a laser beam shot between you both. You fell flat on your back, the wind escaping your lungs as you lay stock still. That had been too close. Too close for comfort. You sat upright as a crunching noise met your ears. What was that? You glanced over your shoulder and felt your heart lurch into your throat. The creaking and rumbling was coming from the bridge. One of Optic's beams had shattered the bottom of one of the supports. It was going to cave in. Supernova was back, her sidekick by her side as she assessed the damage. She was already flying towards Optic, knocking him clear down the street. "Gentlemen, get up on the bridge. Start evacuating people," Supernova ordered. The fencer nodded, leaping off one of the buildings as he vanished over the guardrail. Sabretooth was already taking off, the nagging tug to follow him pulling at your chest. But you ignored it. You weren't about to leave. You had started this, it was your fault. You needed to help save those you had harmed. You sprinted down the street, leaping over the few abandoned cars in your way. Pausing in front of the pillar, you observed the damage. The cement had broke, but the rebar wires were still in place. You took hold of the pillar, wrapping your arms around the cracked pieces, holding them in place. You could act as a brace for a while. It wouldn't fall since you were keeping it from moving. But for how much longer could you hold it? Your watch was shattered and you had no sense of time. You'd been a little busy. At least the fight had moved away. One of the other beams was cracking. The weight of the bridge must have shifted. It couldn't take the pressure. You gritted your teeth, glancing around you for something to help. You couldn't be in two places at once. But you couldn't let the other support break. A familiar red car skidded to a stop across the street. All Might's sidekick waving to you. Hopping over the driver's side door, he jogged over to you. "Need some help?" He questioned, placing an odd square device on the opposite support beam. Pressing a button, metal arms grew from it, strapping into place to make a brace. "That would have been helpful earlier." "Thanks," you grimaced, shifting your grip. "Hang on for a few more seconds. This will only help for a minute or two, but everyone's almost off of the bridge." "All Might's working as fast as he can," he explained, going to set up more braces for the other supports. "Why couldn't he put one on yours?" He had vanished from your line of sight. A deafening creak sounded. "Oh, CRP." Looking up, you saw the bridge tilting to the left. "We need to go," he yelled, running past you. You let go of the support beam, following close behind him. The crunching and shrieking of metal and cement was overwhelming. As the sun was blotted out, you realized you weren't going to get clear in time. Neither was the sidekick. You dove forward, tackling him to the ground. He gave a startled shout as you propped yourself up on your hands and knees. The bridge came crashing down, a swirl of dust and debris blinding you for a good moment. Coughing, you tried to blink the tears from your eyes. Once the debris settled on top of you was when you dared to speak. "You alive?" you questioned shakily. A weak voice that matched your own terrified one responded. Yeah, I'm alive." Toshinori was horrified when he saw the bridge collapse. He had managed to get the last two civilians off when it went down. But what he was scared of was the fact that Dave had been down there. He leaped down beside Supernova and Oceanic, eyes scanning over the other heroes and sidekicks for his friend. Dread gripped his lungs when he didn't find him. He would never forgive himself if Dave was hurt. Or worse, no, he couldn't think that way. He gently grabbed Supernova's shoulder, trying to get her attention. "Where's Dave?" "I haven't seen him. I was fighting Optic," she frowned, brow creasing as she started looking as well. She was rather fond of the inventor. She didn't want to see him hurt due to her negligence. "Dave!" Toshinori called. When he wasn't met with a response is when he really started to panic. Gentleman Fencer waved him over, pointing to the center of the rubble. He was putting braces on the bridge along with another hero. "I don't know if they made it, but I saw them running," he explained. Toshinori took care as he strode over the large cement pieces, hoping his friend was all right. Cupping one hand near his mouth, he tried again. "Dave!" "Here!" Two voices yelled off to his right. He scrambled over the rubble, prying pieces of rebar and asphalt away. When he finally reached the pocket of safety, he found a surprising scene. You were hovering over Dave, using your body as a shield to protect the quirkless man. Your mask had practically been torn in half, revealing your true identity. The one thing you had feared since day one. Your costume was in tattered ruins, though you appeared unscathed nonetheless. "Grab his arm and ease him out. If I move, the piece on top of me will fall," you grunted. Toshinori did as you told him, reaching past to tug Dave out to safety. Once he was clear, you rolled out the large piece of road, landing with a resound crunk. You lay on your back staring up at the hero crouched beside you. Would he arrest you after this? Or would he let you go to the hospital first? Because you were pretty sure your shoulder was dislocated. Dave smacked your shoulder with the back of his hand, breaking you from your thoughts. He tilted his head to look at you with a lopsided smile. What is your quirk? Because that was not super strength. You actually laughed. You couldn't help it. You had just been crushed by a bridge, and the sidekick of your enemy was more interested in your quirk than his injuries. He deserved to know after that near-death experience. Or at least the half of it. Invulnerability. No attacks can harm me while I use it, you grinned, glancing over at him. Toshinori felt an odd sensation flooding his chest. A mixture of relief and something he couldn't quite pinpoint. You were a thief. You had cheated while fighting him countless times. Yet the second someone was in danger, you had stopped to help. Going so far as to save Dave when you knew you'd get caught afterwards. You were confusing. What were you? You weren't a typical villain, but you certainly weren't a hero. Paramedics arrived, ushering Dave towards an ambulance. Upon checking you over, they gave you the okay to go. All Might stood beside you, arms crossed over his chest as he stared off into space. You couldn't possibly escape now. There were 3 pro heroes in the area, not counting their sidekicks. You were indefinitely caught. No possible way to weasel your way out of this one. You gave a sigh as you held your arms out. All Might raised an eyebrow in question as he glanced down at you. Guess you caught me. Can't really make a run for it, you muttered, arms still outstretched. He smiled at you, shaking his head. Go on. You blinked, wondering what he meant. Did he mean get in the cop car? Turn yourself over to a bigger pro? He realized your confusion and his smile only grew. You saved Dave's life. You held the bridge steady long enough for me to get everyone off. I'm letting you go this time. We'll meet again when you're stuck in another air duct, he replied, gesturing to the open street behind you. Was he serious? He was letting you go. Thanks. You beamed, ducking under the police tape. Toshinori might not agree you were the best person, but he owed you for saving Dave. He would let you get away, on purpose, just this once. No more favors though. This was the only handout he would give you. See you around, thief, he called. You turned around, waving to him excitably. Yeah, right, Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy? He stood for a second before snorting. That was the most ridiculous nickname ever. He wasn't at all like Hercules. He was definitely Superman. You sat atop an office building, fiddling with your watch. It had gotten smashed during the bridge collapsing and the fight with the Pisco villain. You scowled as the screen glitched, multiple red blips appearing over the map it displayed. You'd have to go get it fixed by your tech support. You hoped she was still in business. She'd been exceptionally fidgety and nervous the last few times you went to her for repairs. You were too busy grumbling at your watch to notice the figure approaching behind you in the distance. You smacked the watch against the ledge you sat on, the screen scrambling for a split second. To your surprise, it actually started to work again. Maybe violence sometimes was the answer. At least when it came to tech, at least. The screen flashed yellow, alerting you to a hero nearby. You would have ignored it. After all, you weren't doing anything wrong. You were just sitting on a roof in costume. However, the fact that the little red dot was heading straight towards you was cause enough to worry. Sounded from behind you, almost startling you to falling off the building. You turned, expecting to see Sabretooth. Instead, you saw the familiar blue and white costume. All Might. What was he doing here? He said he'd let you go. You helped him out after all. He wouldn't purposefully come hunt you down, right? You weren't going to take any chances. You grabbed the edge of the building, ready to jump if you needed to escape. He raised his hands, signaling he had no ill intent. However, after your many past encounters, you were skeptical. I mean you no harm. I wanted to properly thank you for helping with the villain attack the other day, he explained, staying where he was. You slowly swung one leg back over the ledge. You knew he probably meant it, he had a good heart. But you'd learned to distrust people rather quickly in the past few months. You'd rather have a fast escape than a clumsy one. You frowned at him, leaning forward so both your hands rested on the ledge. Not sure you should, I was kind of the cause of it, you replied under your breath. I mean, he had to know by now that the villain was targeting you, right? He couldn't be that blind. He rubbed the back of his neck, giving you a curious look. I'm trying to wipe the slate clean and get a better understanding of you. You aren't exactly like most criminals. Granted, you are a thief, but you have morals. You've never once harmed an innocent and you only attack when need be. You blinked, staring at him in disbelief. He thought he wanted to know your motive? Seriously? The mighty hero was going to stop and talk to the thief to know their tragic backstory? Sure, it happened in movies and comics all the time. But in real life it wasn't exactly wise. People lied, people could also attack you during your monologue, or stall you until help arrived. You doubted any of those were his intent, but still. So you want to psychoanalyze me? You asked, hoping for clarification. He shook his head, obviously caught off guard by your statement. You couldn't help but smile. Had it always been this easy to luster the giant man? No, that's not what I meant at all. I want to know why. Why do you do what you do? He blurted. Oh, so he did want to know your backstory. What was he hoping to do? Bring you back from the dark side like Luke did to Vader? Connect with you on some level so he can befriend you? That didn't work out, at least not the few times you'd seen it attempted. Those heroes wound up with knives in their backs from so-called friends. All Might's voice broke you from your thoughts. Weren't you ever encouraged to join the hero's course? It would have been better suited for hero work, don't you think? I mean, you have quite a bit of potential and you've obviously honed your skills. You'd make a great hero. He frowned, seeming to be thinking to himself more than you. Your expression darkened as you glanced down at your hands. I was in the hero's course. That caught him by surprise. He arched an eyebrow, crossing his arms over his chest. He didn't look judgmental of you. More like he couldn't understand why you'd go down that path. I mean, to be fair, he probably had the best mentor. Someone who loved him and encouraged him. He probably had it all. Some people just got all the luck. Yet you're living the life of a villain, he stated, waiting for you to explain yourself. You rolled your eyes at that. Did he really think you were going to spill your guts just because he was nice to you? Please, it took 2 months before you told Sabretooth anything about you. You certainly weren't going to tell a hero you'd met a few times anything. Not all of us have hearts of gold, you retorted. He shook his head, moving to sit on a nearby technical unit on the roof. He sat cross-legged, barely fitting on top of the metal box. That's not true, you saved the people on that bridge. Yeah, because I have morals. That doesn't automatically make me good. Stormbreaker is a villain and he rescues people all the time. So does Geomaster, Darkheart, and Perceptor, you countered. He didn't appear to have an argument ready for that point. He scrambled to find something to say to prove they were still bad. I mean, technically they were villains. They tried to destroy cities and kill heroes. You didn't do that. Well, you're losing brownie points. I'd advise staying out of my morals. Next question. You snapped, swinging your leg over the roof's ledge. He felt the sliver of hope he had waning. He knew there was good in you, so why wouldn't you listen? You were still young. You had a life ahead of you. You weren't going to throw that all away for a couple of jewels, would you? Wait, didn't anyone ever try to help you? You had to have mentors if you were in the hero's course. Did something happen? He questioned, standing abruptly. Oh great. Was he going to chase you down if you ran? What was he, 5? You weren't going to braid his hair, make friendship bracelets, and tell him about your problems. He was a hero and you were a villain. Yes, you saw him as a good person. But you weren't that great. Not every mentor was loving and caring and encouraged you. Some of them would beat the snot out of you whenever you let them down. Some weren't very forgiving when you weren't a perfect little angel. I had a problem and they turned a blind eye in hopes that it'd just go away. Yet I kept going and look where that got me. You growled, glaring him down. Kleptomaniac, adrenaline addict, whatever you want to call it. You became a criminal because of a few small problems? Your laugh was almost cruel. Oh, he might look like a god, but he wasn't so clever. He had to have encountered some people in his life like you. Adorned with scars and tired eyes. The ones whose quirks were strong, people who would make great heroes. People who, if they couldn't fit the mold, would break you until you did. He had to have seen them. Yet his gaze was filled with nothing more than irritation, curiosity, and wanting to understand. You could feel your anger rising the longer he stood there, acting like heroes were all good guys. Like heroes never did anything wrong. Your voice rose in volume with each word you spoke until you were borderline yelling. I became a villain because all my life I never once had a choice. My parents were going to make me a hero if it killed me. My fate was decided before I was even born. And I grew up hating the thought of ever being one. It can't be as terrible as that. Heroes help people, they protect against and prevent calamities. Your quirk is a gift, why won't you use it for good? He argued, taking a step forward. In that moment you realized something. He wasn't going to understand you, because he didn't want to. He was blind just like all the others. Just like your parents. You don't know what it's like, do you? You muttered, bowing your head. You weren't going to shout. Mainly because he wouldn't listen. You wanted to though. Instead, your voice was laced with a fatigue very few knew. One that ate at your bones until you caved in and were nothing more than a pile of ash. I was beaten black and blue in training since I was old enough to walk. I was told I was pathetic, weak, and worthless every day. All because I couldn't bench press mountains and keep up with speeding cars. I was never enough and I never would be. You lifted your head to see All Might's startled expression. He was at a loss for words. It was logical to blame your parents, but all heroes? Certainly someone had tried to help you. Not everyone would have abandoned you. You gave a sigh, adjusting the strap on your belt as you turned your back to him. I decided I was going to ruin the Golden Girl legacy my parents wanted. I went against their will every chance I could. I dragged their names through the mud because of what they did to me. So no, this quirk isn't a gift. It's a curse, and I'd rather be quirkless than have it, you hissed, disappearing over the edge of the roof. It took him a moment to realize you'd gone, but even then he didn't give chase. Maybe it would be better to just let you go this once. You had picked up your costume this morning. It was brand new and more durable than the last. At least you hoped so. All Might had seen your face. You couldn't chance him seeing it again. The last thing you needed was for him to recognize you out of costume. It'd be embarrassing to start a brawl in a grocery store with a hero. You laid your costume out on your desk. It was still 4 in the afternoon. You had time to plan tonight's heist. Pack your belt with gadgets and reload your grapple hook. Sabretooth sat on the couch watching you with irritation. Ever since the day you helped hold up the bridge, he had grown fussier and fussier, like a toddler that you took their pacifier from. It seemed he had reached his limit as he let out an agitated huff. Why are you a villain exactly? Are you a kleptomaniac? Because you only steal things. You aren't really a villain. You're a thief, he stated. You shrugged, tossing your gloves onto the table. You thought it was just a friendly banter. He would often taunt you that you were a lowly thief. You just went along with it. It wasn't like he actually meant it. True, I don't want to hurt people. That's what a cat burglar is. You hummed, rifling through your bag of tech. What did you want to take tonight? Always take flashbangs. They had worked to stop All Might. They could probably stop a few other heroes as well. Sabretooth shifted his position on the couch so he could glare you down better. That got your attention. What was he so mad about? Then why be a villain? It's literally in the job description. Villain means you do bad things. You're just a sad excuse of washed-up scrub, he sighed, plopping his chin in his hand. You stared back at him, frozen for a moment. Too shocked by his words to respond. Why was he being so crude all of a sudden? I am not, you hissed. Your anger starting to bubble to the surface. What had caused him to go on this rant? Was he fed up with being your partner? Why didn't he just leave then? You weren't stopping him. Then why were you a villain, or should I say a low-life thug? He smirked. He knew he was getting you riled up. You didn't want to get angry, but he was getting on your everlasting nerve. What was his problem? He didn't wait for an answer before he was off again. Honestly, you SCK. You don't have any real skills. You only know how to take things. That's it. Your fighting is decent at best. You aren't a true villain. You take it as a game. You aren't tapping into your true potential. You could be great, he exclaimed, spreading his arms. He leaned backwards, falling back on the couch. Arching an eyebrow, he looked at you with a disinterested expression. So what's holding you back? What morals are left in that idiot brain of yours? Oh, Daddy threw me out. I'm going to be bad. Look at me, stealing pawn shop jewelry. That's not true, knock it off, you growled. He didn't seem the least bit intimidated. If anything, he seemed to find this hilarious. A newfound smile making its way onto his face. Please. If you didn't meet me, you would still be robbing malls like some teenager. You're pathetic, he snorted. You gritted your teeth, your voice rising to a shout. Shut up. But you won't hurt me. You're far too good to do that. You can't even punch another villain. You really are just a kid playing pretend. You disgust me, he said, pushing himself up onto his feet. He shoved past you, slamming the door on his way out. You were absolutely fuming. What did he know? Your father had always been strict, wanting you to follow in his footsteps to become a pro hero. His anger flaring when you made mistakes which would lead to beatings. Why were you a villain? Because you wanted to disappoint him. You wanted to show him just how much of a screw-up you could be. He wanted a perfect little hero of a daughter? But you'd become a villain. Sabretooth was right though. You were a nobody. A nameless thief living in a run-down building. You were pathetic. An excuse to play dress-up. You weren't invincible, the uncatchable thief. You were Y/N Wilson, the 18-year-old scumbag who made a game out of stealing jewelry. You weren't anyone important. You weren't All Might's nemesis. You weren't anything. You were back at the exact same place you had been since the day you were 12. You were below average. You weren't anything to look at. You were nothing. You've always been nothing and you always would be nothing. You slumped onto the couch, burying your face in your hands. You bit the inside of your cheeks to try and keep the tears from flowing. You hated yourself. You lay on the couch, wrapped in one of your blankets. You had decided to take a small break from your heists. They weren't that great anyway. Don't worry. Your quirk isn't much now. Once your enhanced strength and speed kick in, you'll make a great hero. You never gained those attributes, but he still pushed you nonetheless. Why aren't you signing up for the hero course? You never wanted to be a hero. There were enough heroes as it was. You wanted to be something else. Something different. Stop drawing those silly pictures. They won't get you anywhere. You were 12 years old. You just wanted to show him how your skills had improved. An F in algebra? What are you doing? Sleeping in class? Those words had stung your sophomore year. You had tried so hard to pass that class. You had to go to summer school. Your father grumbled about how bad the public school system was for the rest of summer. Why are you failing all your classes? You aren't trying hard enough. Give me the DMN phone. You aren't getting this back until you bring your grades back up. You never got the phone back because you barely passed with C's and D's. Counting the 1A, which was art. That one didn't count though. The school called. Why weren't you in class today? What were you supposed to tell him? You got over anxious and skipped class because you knew you'd flunk the test? He'd just tell you to get over it. That it was all in your head. What do you mean you didn't know? You stole a car. The panic you had felt was borderline sheer terror. No parent should make you feel that way. Yet ever since you were small he had degraded you. Pushed you around. You knew he wasn't the best parent, but you never considered it abuse. It probably wasn't. You always overreacted to things. Like right now. So what if Sabretooth called you useless? You were laying on a couch for 2 days, moping about a bunch of words that meant nothing to you. Then why did you feel so awful? You rolled over onto your side to stare at the fake fireplace. Sitting on the mantelpiece was the crown, necklace, and All Might figurine you had stolen from the museum. They were the most expensive thing you had ever stolen. Even then it was more Sabretooth who stole them than you. You stole a fancy car. No, that had been Sabretooth as well. He was the one with better tech. Better skills. You were more of a sidekick than him. You really were pathetic. You turned onto your back running your hands through your hair. You couldn't do anything, damn it. What was wrong with you? You were such a screw-up. All because you wanted to probe your father right. To show him a lesson. What had you taught him? Nothing. You had taught him nothing. You had only punished yourself. Could you go back to be a normal person? Probably. Nobody knew your true identity. But the guilt would stay with you. You couldn't go to jail because you wouldn't last a day. You had messed up your entire life, and for what? To shame your family name? Way to go Y/N. You got disowned and only trashed your name. You did amazing at that. You sat up gripping the blanket on your lap. Where were you going to go from here? You didn't have a real job. You had gone off the grid for almost a year. If you tried to be normal again, everyone would wonder what you had done. It wouldn't take long to connect the dots. You'd be arrested eventually. I'm an idiot, you muttered, rubbing at your eyes. One question echoing over and over again. What were you going to do? What were you going to do? You peered over at the crown and other jeweled trinkets. You shuffled to your feet, gentle, picking up the crown. It was appealing and priceless, and Sabretooth's absolute favorite. You held it carefully between your hands, studying the fragile sunflower vines intertwining over the rim. You activated your quirk, pressing your palms together. The gems shattered as the crown crumpled in your grip. You hurled the remainder of it across the room, watching it hit the wall and stick due to the hole it made. Turning to the necklace, you held it in your palm. It never really held any meaning. You just thought it was pretty. You stuffed it into your briefs pocket. You'd destroy it later or pawn it. One or the other. The All Might statue was next. It always made you smile when you saw it. A reminder that you could always beat the golden boy. Yet each time you had been because of luck. You weren't skilled. He was just as inexperienced at you. He was better than you. Just like Sabretooth. Gripping the waist, you began to squeeze. The silver body began to weaken. Small cracks splintering in the soft metal. You hurled it with all your might against the floor. Watching it shatter. One of the arms broke off. The figure splitting in half. It looked like it could be repaired, and it made you furious. You raised your foot to stomp on it but stopped. It was a stupid statue. It wasn't worth finishing off. You spun on your heels, storming over to your suite. This thing was so stupid. It was overpriced, ugly, it didn't even look that unique. You hated it. You hated everything about it. You hated how much of a coward you were. How childish you were. How mediocre you were. This was pointless. This was all pointless. You grabbed the fabric, tearing it with ease. The past falling to the floor in shredded parts. The rest soon following. Why did you even try in the first place? Who were you trying to prove yourself to? Your father? You sure showed him. Your mother? Please, she never looked twice at your talents or abilities. You lost all your friends once your parents kicked you out. Were you trying to prove yourself to you? If so, you were doing an awful job. You glanced about the room at the damage you had caused. It wasn't enough. You wanted to punch something. To do damage. Sabretooth's words rang through your mind. You can't even hurt a villain. Your stomach was turning into knots the more you thought over it. Sabretooth was never your friend. He had been using you. As a place to stay. As someone to talk to. As a scapegoat. A plaything. You meant nothing to him, and that stung. You had told yourself he wasn't important, but you had lied. He had been the only friend you had in a long while. He had shoved you around. Taunted you, made you feel bad. And you let him because he was younger. You told yourself he just didn't know his words stung. That he was just young, a bit naive. But he wasn't naive. He knew what he was doing all along. He was using you, and you let him do it. You slammed your fist into the desk, smashing it in half. The wood splinters flying up into your face. You gritted your teeth. Pulse roaring in your ears. You hated his guts. You hated him. You hated All Might. You hated the world. You wanted nothing more than to crush it in the middle of your hand. I hate them all. Sabretooth sat in a lazy chair. Legs propped up on the arm as he examined his nails. Sit correctly, Cameron. Ah, relax, old man. I sure am. One look from the old man had him sitting upright. He was glaring now, and Sabretooth was starting to look uneasy. Which was no easy task. You lost her trust, the man growled. Sabretooth offered a small smile as he spoke as steadily as he could. Yeah, but I have her right where we want her. And where is that? The man retorted. Sabretooth perked up almost instantly. He had a chance at redeeming himself here. Anger makes people more easy to control. They aren't thinking straight. They act on their darker impulses, he listed off. The man arched an eyebrow in disinterest. Is this leading to something? She'll come looking for a fight. Or at least be more susceptible to starting a fight. We track her down. I get her riled up, use my hypnosis, and you snatch her quirk. Sabretooth grinned. The man thought it over for a second before nodding. You're lucky your mistake worked out. Otherwise I'd have taken both of your quirks back, he stated, stalking back towards the room he had emerged from. Sabretooth slumped in his seat, hands shaking as he watched the man disappear. Once the door was closed and he was certain he couldn't be here, he spoke. Whatever, old man. You can't get my quirks anyway. Toshinori's time in America had drawn to an end. He had to return to Japan. He needed to keep his promise to Nana. He was going to become the best hero. A pillar of peace everyone could depend on. He sat beside Dave at gate 18. His eyes closed as his head lolled forward. He had been up till midnight on patrol. Then he had to pack because he forgot. Not to mention it took forever to fall asleep. Then he had to wake up at 4 so they could make it to the airport before 6 before his plane left. It was too many times to remember and no rest. Though he supposed this is what it was going to be like from now on. He was gaining fame and experience. The more people depended on him, the less personal time he would have. His head started to fall forward and he started awake. Dave looked just as tired, but he was doing a better job at staying awake. Though it was for a completely different reason. Dave felt awful. He had forgotten all about the hero organization telling him about Sabretooth. He had set the folder down when he returned to the garage. He had set to work upgrading the car. He must have set his toolbox on top of the file because he totally forgot about it. How could he forget something that important for 3 months? Not only that he had finally found it last night while he was organizing the garage. He wanted to slam his head against the wall. Brainiac had asked for everyone's assistance. They must think Toshinori was a JRK now for not showing up to the meetings required for info on the quirk harvesters. What was even more worrisome was that nobody had mentioned it to him. Did nobody care about the harvesters? Maybe they stopped looking? He was overwhelmed with his thoughts. He couldn't stop thinking about it. What if somebody had been hurt all because he forgot? Now boarding class A seats 1 through 15. Dave's head snapped up at the woman's voice coming over the loudspeakers. How long had he been zoned out? Toshinori stood up, grinning down at his friend. That's me, remember to email and call. I want to know when the top hero offers to buy your car, he joked. Dave nodded, trying to give a sincere smile in return. The tall blonde almost knocked himself out when he tried to enter the terminal, having to stoop down to fit. Dave would have laughed if he didn't feel so awful. Maybe he didn't have to worry? Nobody had mentioned the quirk harvesters for a while. Perhaps they had been caught. Though he knew there would have been a news article about it. His chest filled with dread as he strode towards the airport exit. He tried not to worry about it. It wasn't his problem anymore. He had never been more wrong. Hypnosis. Side effects. Over a long PRD of exposure to the silver tongue quirk, the victim becomes infected with the pheromones provided from the user. Even if it's been years and the victim stumbles upon the user again, the user can control them in an instant. This chemical never appears to fade. Depending on how much of a dosage the victim has, the more responsive they are. It only takes one time of them doing something they don't want to do for the controller to take full control, turning the victim into a puppet. Warning. A side effect of this quirk is that the controller must have a handle on the victim at all times. Otherwise, the victim will act upon all desires and urges to the extreme, including violent outbursts, intrusive thoughts that can lead to self-harm. Always be aware of the intended victim. It had almost been a month since All Might left and Sabretooth called you out. Your life had come to a standstill. You had enough money saved up to survive a few more months without having to do anything. You felt like you were frozen in time. You couldn't go forward and you couldn't go back. So what could you do other than freeze as well? You sat on the couch scrolling through your phone. Your watch screen a brilliant green. You hadn't used your invincibility much in the past few weeks. What was the use? You didn't need to defend yourself. You didn't need to break anything. Well, besides the occasional object. A knock on your door nearly gave you a heart attack. You sat stock still as you stared over at the door. Who could be Dash? Hey, Invincible. It's me. I want to talk, Sabretooth called. You felt your pulse quicken. What was he doing back here? He said he was done with you. He made it clear he thought you were worthless. Why was he back? Despite your better judgment, you got up to open the door, though only letting it open halfway. The feline man wore a cheerful smile, sincerity radiating from him. I know we had our little argument a while back. I was a JRK, I get it. I was just upset. I felt like I was being held back. Forgive me? He asked, giving you his puppy eyes. You felt the haze returning, something you hadn't felt since he left. You stared at him, eyes narrowing. You knew better than to trust him. He was too sly for his own good. He had done something to your brain while he was your partner. You didn't want this feeling back. You didn't like it, and you hated him. No, now leave, you muttered, shutting the door. He stuck his foot into the doorway with an abnormally broad smile. Come now, Y/N. I didn't say we needed to be friends. I just said forgive me. Please? I have a sliver of a conscience. I need to know you forgive me. Come on, that's all I want, he pleaded, his voice growing more whiny by the second. Didn't he ever shut up? Why didn't he just leave? You knew he was lying. Fine. Yes, I forgive you. Happy? You snapped. The second the words left your mouth, it felt like someone had stuffed your head into a bag of cotton. Your body felt heavy and your mind felt numb. What kind of quirk was he using? Brainwashing? Paralysis? Why wouldn't your body responding? Be a good girl and open the door, Invincible, he smirked. You found yourself complying without willingly doing so. What was going on? Stop it. 3 men stood behind him, clad in white scrubs, medical masks pulled over their faces. Who were they? What were they going to do to you? You can put the cuffs on her. She won't be able to think about anything right now. She's as good as unconscious, he declared cheerfully. The men nodded, striding into the apartment. One held a bag, the others had a set of restrainer cuffs and a head brace. You knew this equipment. You had seen the commercials and videos. This was a quirk harvesting gear, and you'd fallen right into their trap. Why did you have to be such an idiot? Why were you so gullible? The doctor stepped forward, clipping the cuffs on your wrists. They were locked together, encased in a solid steel alloy. Every part of your mind was screaming to get out of there, to run for it. But something inside of you was awakening. Primitive, dark, and angry. You pulled your arms to your chest, activating your quirk. Skin graying almost instantly. The doctors took a step back uncertainly. With a sickening crack, you shattered the cuffs with ease. Sabretooth turned to look at you, eyes widening in shock. Nobody had managed to break those cuffs. Even the super strength quirks. You lunged at him, tackling him to the floor. The fear in his eyes as you raised your fist. But the blow never landed. Something struck your side, sending you spiraling through the air. You hit the far wall with a deafening bang. A new dent forming next to the hole the crown had made. It felt like you'd been hit by a train. For a second you couldn't move. You feared you were paralyzed. Until you realized it was Sabretooth's quirk holding you at bay. No, he couldn't control you. You wouldn't let him. You thought were going to kill him. You climbed to your feet, glaring down the man in front of you. Sabretooth was cowering behind him. He looked like an average person. Ruffled dark green hair, piercing eyes, and a soft smile. I told you she wasn't ready, he said, glancing back at the fearful teen. His gaze cold and menacing. He returned his attention to you. The soft smile returning. Why don't you calm down before I do something I regret? I was going to remove your quirk the easy way. Would you rather I tear it from your lifeless body? It'd be very messy and it won't come out as well, he mused, hand outstretched towards you. You planted your feet, bracing yourself. The impact from the blast of his air attack struck you, but this time you stayed in place. Why isn't my quirk working on her? She isn't listening. Sabretooth hissed. You shook your head. What did he mean? The haze was still making it difficult to think, much less do any coherent movements. Because boy, anger is a very strong motivator. Let's see how well that invincibility of yours holds out. He grinned wickedly. He reached his hand out, clenching it into a fist. Your limbs contracted as an invisible force began to crush your body. Wait, You thought he had an air manipulation quirk. What was this? You struggled in his grip, clenching your jaw as you barely managed to move your head. He swung his arm out and you broke through the window of your apartment. You fell the 3 stories to the street below, landing on shards of glass in the process. Breathing, you scrambled to your feet. The man easily leaped down into the street. What was he? A polymorph? No, they weren't strong. It settled in once you saw him stand up. He was a black market user, grafting multiple quirks to his body. How was he alive? Most people barely survived grafting toe quirks, but it seemed like he had 3 or 4. You were too busy worrying to notice the lamp post hurtling towards you. That was until it hit you square in the back of the head. You hit the ground face first as the pole wrapped around your arms. Metal kinesis. Sabretooth was watching from the window. You didn't need to see his face to see he was excited. He wanted to watch you die? Of course he did. He was a villain. Why did you ever decide to choose this pathway? You pried your arms free, struggling to pull the lamppost off your waist. All the while the man merely watched. Good, you can bend objects, survive high impacts and falls. But what about punches? Let's see how well you hold up against super strength, he hummed, swinging his arm back. You wanted to vomit as you watched. His arm grew in size, metal shards protruding from the flesh. This had to be a nightmare. He couldn't possibly exist. Nobody with this many quirks was real. The punch landed before you even processed it. You skidded back a few feet, but were otherwise unharmed. He seemed genuinely impressed. Wonderful. Your quirk will do nicely. It has everything I'm looking for. Now, before I take it, which would you prefer? Me to leave you body here where no one will ever find it? Or on the porch of a loved one? I feel gracious today, you let me test my checklist. I'll leave you in one piece so they have something left to bury, he chuckled. He thought this was funny? The feeling was back in 10 force. The anger, the hatred. You knocked him across the force, his jaw shattering to pieces on impact. He swayed in place, his hand moving to touch his mutilated face. But you didn't give him time to react. You jumped to your feet, bringing your knee up against his lower ribs. Another crack, and the bones shattered. You elbowed him in the shoulder, forcing him to double over. Gripping the back of his sweet jacket, you smashed your knee repetitively into his face. You didn't stop even as the blood spattered against the pavement, or when he went limp against you. You only let go of him once you started to get nauseous. You let go of his jacket, allowing him to drop to the ground, blood pooling from his distorted face. Was he dead? You couldn't care less. You took a step back before a rumbling laugh escaped the body before you. Sickening squelched and slurps were heard as his bones snapped back into place. No. Impressive. Here Sabretooth told me you were opposed to violence. Most fascinating. You've punched others before, but they never broke. You've been holding out on me, but I've had enough. Now, hold still so I can rip that quirk from you, he beamed. Red and black tendrils sprouted from his fingers, flying straight towards your chest. You threw your arms up to block, the tendrils striking your arm instead. They drilled past your skin, tearing into your muscles in the process. You let out a strangled scream as you stumbled back. Grabbing the tendrils, you gave a swift JRK, tearing them from your arm. He had penetrated your invincibility. Nobody had ever managed to do that before. You cradled your wounded arm to you, eyes staring in sheer fear at the man before you. The tendrils hovered at bay as he studied you. Now, that was interesting. Perhaps we should force you out of that invincible skin. That should work, he muttered to himself. What was he talking about? He pointed at you, eyes narrowing. Sleep. The last thing you remembered was a bright flash before everything faded from view. A low murmur surrounded the darkness around you, a steady hum that agitated you. You tried to wake up multiple times, but no matter how hard you strained, your body remained still. Were you in sleep paralysis? You had read about that before. But this felt too long to be sleeping. Maybe a bad dream? Yeah, you'd wake up and it'd all be all right. For now, you'd rest. Sabretooth stood beside his Emma as he glared at the expanse of rooms before him. It was hardly enough for him. The weak, low-tier quirks that were being harvested in each one. They were far too weak. Nothing special. But you were the most disappointing. It seemed your quirk refused to leave your body. He had attempted multiple times to pry it from your DNA. Yet it had stuck like tar. All he did was mangle your arm. He had tried for the past 5 hours. Usually if they couldn't harvest a quirk within the first hour of kidnapping, they'd dump the person. But he wasn't about to let you go. It was infuriating to say the least. He had been depending on your quirk. He needed it if he wished to kill Toshinori once and for all. To end the line of one for all users. Sabretooth seemed to sense his anger because he hadn't spoken out once today. Sabretooth? Yes, sir? Tell the surgeons to prepare an extraction. We're going to try again, he growled, stalking off towards one of the many hallways. Sabretooth frowned, crossing his arms over his chest. But you already did. If you can't, then how could you dash? Did I ask for your statement? His MSTR questioned flatly, his glare quickly silencing the feline teenager. He bit back any further comments. Nodding his head. Please, sir. I'll inform them. You heard something clanging. An odd beeping sound. An alarm? You didn't have an alarm clock. Your eyesight started to return as the ringing grew louder. It was almost deafening. You were strapped down to a bed. In a room you didn't recognize at all. It was black and beige. With no windows. The only way you could see was the small light bulb above you that would flash red every few seconds. It felt like something out of a surreal movie. What was going on? Gritting your teeth you attempted to move, but the pain was too excruciating. Instead, you chose to cry. You didn't know what was going on. It felt too unreal. Why did you hurt? Why were you here? The door opened and you almost screamed. Almost being the key word. Your throat was too gummy for you to make any noise. A blurry bright silhouette entered the room. Supernova's gaze landed on your still form strapped to the bed. You looked all right, if you didn't account for your right arm. The other people they had found were too far malnourished to save. That, or they had already bled out. Quirk harvesting facilities were always the worst place to find. You must have just been brought in. Poor thing, look at your arm, the glowing woman tooted. She grew closer, though kept a distance of about 2 feet. It took you a few minutes to recognize her as Supernova. You were too lightheaded to think straight. Wait, lightheaded? Why were you lightheaded? Closing your eyes, you tried to focus your muddled thoughts. Okay, in a place you didn't know. You were hurting. Darkness. The man. There was a man and Sabretooth. A man and Sabretooth had come to your apartment. He had hit you. Hot tears trickled down your cheeks as you attempted to swallow back a sob. They were quirk harvesters. Had they stolen your quirk? You didn't know. You could only feel pain. We were too late, a gruff voice sighed. You opened your eyes to see Heavy Hitter. His mask hid his face mostly, but his body posture said enough. He genuinely thought you were dead. But what was wrong? You couldn't move your head to see your body. What did you look like? What did they do to you? Supernova sat on the bed beside you, keeping her hands folded in her lap. No, she is alive. That is what matters at the moment. Tell Oceanic to search the rubble for any others who might have been held captive as well. Heavy Hitter turned to leave when a third person entered. Apparently they found you fascinating. You found Samo. Heavens, her arm. I think I'm going to be sick, Gentleman Fencer stammered. Supernova watched the teen hero trying not to dry heave as he stepped back. Get a healer in here and call the emergency evacuation center. We're going to be needing more ambulances, Supernova instructed. Heavy Hitter was already gone, Gentleman Fencer soon following. The glowing hero turned back to face you, shushing you as you started to cry once more. It'll be all right. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. It's going to be okay. Just hang in there. We'll get you healed, she cooed reassuringly. How could she know that? You didn't even know how long you had been here. What had been done to you? How could she sit there and tell you everything was fine? But she kept true to her promise. When the paramedics arrived and you were moved onto a gurney, she stayed with you, squeezing your left hand as she continued to give words of encouragement. You didn't believe a single one of them. Your left arm had practically been torn to shreds. Muscles and nerves destroyed. Skin ragged and veins crushed. You were lucky one of the top healers was still visiting the LA Monroe Hospital. though it still looked like you'd shoved it into a deep fryer. It was bandaged neatly to hide the new pink scar tissue that now marred your limb. You were laid out in a hospital bed, doted on and told you were brave. If they only knew the true story. The police hadn't asked for your statement yet, and you weren't certain what to tell them either. Mostly because you couldn't remember much. You could remember up until the point where the man threw you through the wall. After that it was dark. Supernova informed you had been there for 6 hours. 6 hours. Some of the patients had been there for days. Weeks even, and you had been there for 6 hours. You were in no way brave. You had been unconscious. You weren't courageous. The only wound being your arm. Your quirk was still intact upon the doctor's investigation. You guess you were relieved. But what bothered you most was the fact everyone treated you like you were innocent. Some sort of martyr for living through a scary experience you couldn't even recall. It was your profession that got you into this mess. You had a choice to make. Would you lie and pretend you weren't robbing and pillaging stores the past year? Or did you confess and tell them how you really came to be captured? It'd be easy to lie. To say you couldn't remember the past year. Play it off as traumatic amnesia or something. But you were tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of lying. Tired of being something that wasn't you. You didn't even know who you were anymore. You were pulled from your internal hatred when something clattered outside your door. The most colorful strong of curses you had ever heard coming from the hallway. You blinked in surprise, lifting your head to see a tall woman in maybe her early 40s. She had her hands on her hips, staring up at the ceiling as she took deep breaths. "Lord, give me strength before I shoot myself for dropping another bedpan," she growled, stalking off down the hallway. She returned a second later with a mop and towels. It looked like someone was having just as bad a day as you were. Once she had mopped up the mess, she tossed the towels down, moving them around with her foot to dry the floor. She looked up to meet your gaze and stopped her cleaning, eyes narrowing slightly. "How long have you been watching?" she questioned with a scowl. You blinked again, trying to find your words. A dash. "If anyone asks, you didn't hear anything. We're not supposed to swear in front of young patients," she frowned. You weren't young. You were 18, almost 19. She disappeared for a second time, taking the towels, mop, and bedpan with her. You thought that was going to be the end of the foul-mouthed nurse. Until she returned a moment later, her hands in her scrub-top pockets. She strode over to the end of the bed, picking up the clipboard posted there. "My name is Mandy Jefferson. I'm your night shift nurse. And it says here you're Y/N Wilson. Emergency contacts didn't pick up. You came from A," she trailed off, squinting at the words on the paper. She gave a soft hum, flipping the paper over to look at the rest of the writing. "You're a wreck. How are you awake? They gave you enough pain meds to knock out an elephant," she grinned. You didn't smile back. She shrugged, setting the clipboard back in place. "Worth a shot. How are you feeling?" she questioned, leaning against the footrail. You glanced down at the bandage on your arm, hiding the ugly thing that was now your arm. "Fine," you replied quietly. She nodded, picking up a tray on the table near the door. She sat down beside you, holding her hand out. "I know this will be weird and probably hurt a whole lot for a few weeks, but I need to change the bandages and clean it," she explained. You timidly held out your arm. Even if you couldn't feel it, you were still afraid of her touching it. The bloodied, mangled image was still stuck in your mind. She undid the bandages with professional speed. Before you knew it, your arm was cleaned, ointment, and rebandaged. You stared at the new white gauze that was wrapped securely around your arm. How had she done that so quickly? It seemed almost inhuman. She checked the watch on her wrist, collecting the dirty supplies. Tossing them away safely, she headed towards the door. She leaned against the doorframe, looking back at you. "Buzz the little remote on your left. That'll bring me running. If not, at a leisurely walk. Hang tight, the day nurse is worse than me," she smirked, walking back into the hallway. You sat in confusion as you stared at the bandage. You lay back against your pillow, heaving a sigh, trying to steady your breathing. Today was too full of confusion and misdirection. You wished you could rewind time. Maybe then you could wrap your brain around it all. The world seemed to have been sped up while you were asleep. Everything moving faster than you could comprehend. You didn't like it. You didn't like it at all. You sat upright against your headboard. 2 pillows stacked behind you to help keep you upright. In front of you stood 2 police officers. They had been questioning you over the facility and what you could remember, working their way backwards through the story. Officer Danes was the shorter policeman, with curly black hair, while Officer Foster was tall with 2 ram horns crowning his head. They seemed nice. Officer Danes had taken charge of the questioning, writing down your answers and his own notes on a pad of paper he held. Where did they take you from? When we contacted your parents, they said you had left about a year ago, he stated, scribbling on his notepad. You felt your stomach twisting into knots. What were you going to say? Lying would be so easy. You could act like nothing ever happened. Start life over new. Turn over a new leaf. Not have to bother with the thought you might go to jail. An overwhelming sense of dread settled in your chest. No, you couldn't do that. You didn't want to go through life as a liar. Would it be the right decision? What if you wound up stuck in prison for the rest of your life? You couldn't survive that. But what type of person would you be to lie? You'd be just as worse off as you were when you were playing villain. You'd always have to watch your back. It took every ounce of courage to speak. I was living on the streets. Working as a jewelry thief, you mumbled, bowing your head as fear gripped your chest. It was up to them now to decide what would happen. Officer Danes nodded, making a note at the bottom of the page. Invincible, isn't it? He replied. Your eyes widened. Wait, if he had figured it out, why had he asked you? Officer Foster didn't look the least bit fazed as Danes continued. And Sabretooth, how did you know him? He came to me a few months back saying he wanted to be my partner, you stated quietly. You were already regretting telling them. But if they had already known you had been screwed either way, maybe confessing outright would lighten your sentence? You'd seen it in Blue Bloods, it could happen, right? And Sabretooth never hinted to you joining his colleagues? Danes said, looking up at you. Your brow furrowed in confusion. Colleagues? Sabretooth was a part of a group? No, I always thought he worked alone until he captured me, you glowered. So Sabretooth had been doing this for a while? How many others had he tricked? Did they even stand a chance against his quirk? And the man that attacked you, had he killed them? That's all for now. We'll come back in about 2 hours to start a new report on your thieving, he hummed, closing his notebook with a snap. You stared at them in disbelief. No handcuffs? No, you're under arrest, we're taking you to jail? You'd admitted to being a villain. Shouldn't you be locked up? Danes seemed to notice your bewilderment. Sighing, he placed his notebook in his pocket. No, we aren't dragging you off to jail. You're a part of an ongoing case as a witness. And you are also still in hospital custody because of your injury. Until the trial is over and you're healed, you'll stay here. He started towards the doorway, allowing Officer Foster to exit before him. He paused for a second, glancing back at you. Look, I get it. I hate to do this, but I have a duty to uphold. I've seen plenty of kids in the same position as you. Some advice? He said, holding up a finger. You kept your mouth shut, waiting for him to continue. Right now you needed all the advice you could get. You're 18, even if you're considered a kid, you'll be tried as an adult. Depending on who speaks at you trail, you could get off easy, he shrugged, closing the door. Witnesses? Who could you get to speak highly about you? You weren't some Robin Hood. You hadn't really helped anyone but yourself in the past months. You leaned your head back against the dashboard, gazing up at the off-white ceiling. How are you going to get yourself out of this situation now?